Hello and welcome to episode 158 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me as ever is Mr. Howard. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. You doing all right?
I'm doing grand. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good actually. Surfacing from the challenges of a new little one in the household, but not doing too badly.
Oh, yes.
And you're a whole old hand at that now, of course.
I'm like a couple of months ahead.
Exactly.
Been there, done that. No,
Yeah.
still trying to work any of it out, frankly. But hey, it's all good. It's all good. Before we go any further, let us talk Element Games because they have whatever you need, frankly.
Which
Whether
is
it's
everything right now.
It's
of course.
just, yeah, mate, paints, new contrast paints if you want them. Some of them look really good. New oils, new washes, sorry, from G-Dub as well. Lots and lots of plastic 30k. And I know there are people still waiting on deliveries and stuff, but GW can only make it so fast and only send it out to people so fast. So you can't necessarily blame any third party, if they're holding on to an order of yours, because the demand is high. But yeah, you can go and check out Element Games for books and games and airbrushes and airbrush paints and whatever you need. And you can use our link to support the show. Thank you for everyone who supported the show in purchasing their boxes or little bits and pieces. It's good. I have got things to buy for the show, so it will be put to good use.
Oh, it sounds like a secret plan. I like that.
It's a bit of a secret plan because I can't say anything because if it doesn't happen, I can't get lambasted
Can't
for
make
it.
promises.
It's been trying to happen for about a month and a half, but finding time is not too easy at the moment. Hopefully, when the little one gets a bit more settled in going to bed at a reasonable hour and everything like that. But who knows?
Yeah, I wish someone had mentioned that. Turns out you can't rely on a rigid routine immediately. That's really surprising.
Well, I mean, I'm not an experienced parent. I'm not going to rely on a rigid routine ever.
I went straight in on that basis. Turns out, no.
Yeah,
not so much.
Exactly. Yeah, no, they are a pain in the rear, but
in
what
the most
can you
magical, wonderful way. Of course.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Bless his cotton socks. So hopefully we can get a bit more organised. And this is, trying to find a time to record is always fun, particularly when we've both got kids who are always going to be on slightly different schedules and everything else. Thank God for good wives, eh?
Oh my goodness! Keeping the wheels on this whole operation, frankly.
Indeed. And having a dedicated hobby space is not always an easy thing to do either.
Suddenly looking like you've got to defend that, like the walls. It's suddenly having to keep our hands on those somehow, which might be challenging.
Well, I mean, we've got a garage that is starting to get somewhere, seeing as it was started right at the beginning of COVID. We ended up giving up and getting a builder in to finish bits off, but then that's only finishing off the building bits. Then everything else that's got to go with it. So, yeah, who knows? But it's all part of the fun. And in all that time, I'm looking at every time I walk in here and there's heresy stuff on the table, and I'm like, yep, haven't got any time to do that. Haven't got any time to do that.
The amount of that I've planned in my head, because there's so much content. Now I'm so excited with people getting their stuff and started to see it hit everyone, where particularly people who are infinitely more productive than I am are putting out their stuff, and you're like, this is fantastic. Just to see all these things, the ideas, and people experimenting with different things. You think this is a good time to be following a lot of Instagram accounts, Facebook groups. It's cool. I mean, we'll get into this, but wow! I mean, we knew it was going to be fairly busy. It does seem to have been extraordinarily popular.
It's going big. It's going big. And that's cool.
Our local game store here had 2 articulated lorries of stock, and they sold out at least once over. I think they weren't allocated enough anyway for what they needed to fulfill, at least not in the first wave. So yeah, it seems to have gone down pretty well, and judging by what we're seeing online, very cool. There's a lot of people experimenting with different. It seems everyone's kind of gone straight in to have a pretty reliable force. pretty substantial force straight off. They're not like I'm going to get a tactical squad box, maybe two, and a the leader and HQ of some kind. No, we've gone with the box, maybe two.
What's
Good
really
effort.
made me laugh, I was on a Discord and someone said, I can't believe how many good paint jobs I've seen from like people who've only just started to get into 30k, and I'm like, yeah, because there's serious amounts of good hobbyists out there that don't
Yeah.
play 30k, and there's a serious amount of people who played 40k in the same kind of style that you and I play 30k.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just talk in different circles, they walk in different circles. Like someone said,
I
oh, you
think
just
also
the problem with social media of all kinds
I love a sentence that
is
starts like that.
they become echo chambers to a point. Within remits, they all become an echo chamber. Like that echo chamber might be really tight, it might be really huge, but they guide you towards fellow thinkers and all that kind of stuff. So if you're not, this is a problem people had looking into the heresy. Unless you specifically followed someone who played heresy, or you followed someone who played multiple game systems. Like for a while, I was the only person a number of my Warhammer friends knew played heresy because I'd post about it.
Mm.
But it doesn't take long when you're on social media to follow one, follow two, to find that group of people. And the way I monitor my Twitter particularly is I'm like, cool hobby and whatever. I'm not getting involved in dramas. I'm not doing any of that. But actually, I've got into like, listening to people who do 40k narrative events and whatever. And all of a sudden, you find more people who do 40k narrative events and people who are making like literal chapters or companies of chapters or whatever, in the same approach that people classically consider heresy to be.
Mm. There seems to be not only have you got that with people coming across. I would say we're in an era where there are techniques and guides and tools available,
Yeah,
and a willingness to dive into them, and because they've been made infinitely more accessible, that the sort of leveling up of the hobby, if you will, has been considerable in a very short space of time. It's
yeah.
quite straightforward,
But what's
relatively, to get a good-looking force painted up
big time.
compared to what it once was.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, you look at people who went to that open day, and people talk about like, oh, I didn't realize so many people were doing that. Like, people were talking about how few of the people at the open day involved with it were heresy stalwarts. But all those people were painting. Like, all those people are either creating or painting. Like, and you only have to look at like one here out. I can't remember his name now. JH. Is it JH Miniatures?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his Hidalgo. Is it?
Mm.
Um, fantastic stuff he puts out on his social media. He's the one who's did side by sides of Marines with the washes to show the difference
Oh,
between
yeah.
the new and old washes, and he did stuff with contrasts as well, and putting out some amazing stuff. And I'd never heard of him because he just hadn't come across. I hadn't come across that circle of people, like
Mm-hmm.
to get into that. But then you look at some Richard Gray is one who crosses across those kind of things, so everyone's kind of heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
But there are lots of people out there, maybe not doing the same level as Richard Gray. Few are, but there are lots of people doing some really cool stuff. Liam Payne's Miniatures, there's one,
Mm-hmm.
right? He has an approach to the game, and a bit like Wargamer Pete, yeah, there's an approach to the game that actually is the kind of approach I enjoy.
Mm.
He's not talking about what's hardest or whatever. And to be honest, sometimes I like that. But he's just like, I have a really cool salamanders army, and I really like painting salamanders. So crack on, great.
Yeah, yeah.
It's weird how, again, it became kind of a cycle of misinformation almost. That if you play 30k, you are much more likely to be a collector and do that kind of thing. But before I got into this game, I remember being a primary school, pre-teen, and seeing a whole Empire army on the shelf of my mate's house, and it was like, dedicated, like, you collected an army, not a force to play with. Like, that was almost more common
Mm.
back then. So it's the approach is less like tournament. When you look at 40k and Age of Sigmar, tournaments always speak louder because they've got
Mm.
more to talk about effectively, and so their voice comes across louder. But I still maintain, that they're the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people seem to have been drawn to not just heresy, but all that kind of goes with it in a big way. And I'm quite. It's been. I think it's been brilliant just to see all these different things experimenting. And I think we're going to have it for quite a while as people start putting things together, painting them, trying out things perhaps they haven't done before. I've seen people trying new techniques. We've got new paints coming as well, so people are perhaps going to experiment with those. It's pretty cool, frankly, and to see people jumping in quite such a big way rather than doing it piecemeal. You think that's quite an achievement, and I hope it carries on, which I think it will.
I think it will, and it's interesting to be on different heresy groups, and there's people coming with a much more rules-specific approach, shall we say?
Mm,
I have joined the competitive heresy group to kind of just as a curiosity, to be honest, because sometimes I'm fairly sure that will throw up some interesting things to look
mm,
at down the line. But even in Crusade and Heresy, there's people asking questions. They're like, this, and this, and there's the odd person going, "Oh, don't be like that in this game," and it's like, well, clarity of rules isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are some people who appear to be pushing rules. But again, that's going to happen.
mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, let's talk about this later because that comes into other stuff we're going to talk about.
All right, all right.
So let's move on from that. You've been doing any hobby?
A little bit where I could. I've been planning an awful lot, researching an awful lot, because that's generally all I can manage of an evening. But I have built a Kratos, which has been a hell of a fun kit, actually. I've done sort of with the exception of the Contemptor, I think I've done all the new vehicles that have come out, and I've got, I think, 20 Mark 6 done now. Just experimenting with those because I kind of want to try out some different things with them if I can. But yeah, the Spartan went together an absolute dream. The new Rhino
Yeah,
is brilliant.
haven't done that
Certainly
yet.
for anyone who's done the resin one. And the Kratos is a pleasure. It's a big old kit, Kratos.
Yes.
There's a lot
Have
going
you
on there.
have you seen Chapter Master Valric's Kratos?
Yes, the
He's
two
taken the
two
top
that
from
he's
the
doing.
Gladiator
Yeah.
and put it on top, and it kind of works.
Oh, very well.
It's
Yeah.
a bit more. It makes it look. It's a weird cross then between this sci-fi tank and more of a modern
Mm.
tank that we see.
It was
I
the
kind of
same.
like it.
I got the same vibes when I saw someone put a current Predator and a
Yeah.
40k Predator turret on a Chimera for the first time,
All
and it
right. Yeah, that's quite cool.
had a real modern era tank feel to it, which was quite cool. And I had the same sort of hit when I saw it. Thought, oh, okay, that's quite a look. It takes it away from the sort of the family. What I really like about the Kratos is it's so obviously part of that family of vehicles. You can just see
Yeah,
it as that sort of design hierarchy going through from the Fell Blades
makes it
and the
stand out
Sakaran.
though.
Oh, absolutely. Cool as a variant, and particularly with some of these armored spearhead lists that could be possible. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a fan of that
unfortunately,
kit a lot.
that tank is going to cost you, even with GW prices, £108, I think,
Eesh.
which is slightly expensive, but it's kind of cool. I kind of like it. Yeah, the Kratos is a cool tank, and we've seen videos now. Josh was the first person I saw to do it. Omegon's Edge to show how. I think I missed a bit off the top of that. Actually, I need to double check that while I'm looking at it. Omegon's Edge was the first one to show how easy it could be to leave the gun off and replace it and
Mm-hmm.
paint all the guns and do weapon swaps and blah 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 blah.
I mean, I'm a huge
Frankly,
fan
I
of
can't be
magnetisation,
bothered.
coming out of Titanicus in particular. But I mean, I've done it for years with 28mm stuff of magnetising. You don't really need to magnetize a great deal on the Kratos, if anything, really. The
Yeah.
the sponsons have got the same, obviously, have got the same fitting as the Spartan and probably all of the coming Heresy plastics. The upper sponsons, the hull guns, are perfectly fine as a friction fit.
Yeah.
And you could even just leave the top panel of the turret to be removed, so you can switch out the
You
main gun.
could, couldn't you? Yeah.
It rather depends how fussy one is, and that's a bit
Do you know what
of
I
a
did?
strong term. But what
I
did you do?
just glued it in. I couldn't be
Whoa.
bothered. I was like, I'll get another one.
It's a shame. That's a shame. That's the show over. There we go. See you again.
I'll
See you
get
next time,
another
everyone.
one. I want a melter. I will get the Volkite. I'm not sure I want the battle cannon,
What?
but I probably
The
will.
coolest looking one.
Whatever. Um,
No,
I
maybe the
also
Volkite, but all right.
I haven't looked at it properly. There's part of me that thinks it's the one everyone looked at, and it could do so much. And I played with it, and I was like, I can see it being a bit too middle of the road potentially.
Ooh, interesting.
Depends on list.
Jack of all trades kind of thing.
Yeah, it depends on list. I suspect, but it didn't do a huge amount when I was using it. But that could be game dependent. But yeah, I was like, cool, this one's getting a melter because cool, big melter is fun. Yeah, no, Kratos is fantastic.
So yeah, I've got a lot of grey plastic that's at least being built, and I'm really enjoying building those kits. What about yourself?
Tell me about it.
Have you been working on anything?
I've almost finished my Kratos.
Hey,
Almost, not quite. I've almost finished an Age of Sigmar Gargant, and that's about all the hell hobby I've got around to doing.
well, you
Crazy,
actually played games though. You've done better than I have. You got out and played some games.
Played a couple of games, yeah, and I was supposed to have played one yesterday. I was going to come in with all these tales of daring do from my game yesterday, but unfortunately we're doing that next week now. But yeah, got a couple of games in, seen a couple of the guys playing games. Yeah, just trying to get anywhere with this, trying to get my life organised in the evenings. It's taking some time, but we will get there. Try and have a good read of the rule books actually to
I know what you
kind
mean,
of sit
actually.
there, and there's a lot of special rules, and I think so. There's a guy on one of the discords who works for Forge World who has obviously been part of the playtesting in house, and he's like, I've watched a number of battle reports and not one of them's got brutal right yet, but they've all played it slightly different. That kind of thing.
Amazing.
And it's like, okay, let's check I did it right. I think I did. I think we played it right. But yeah, there's lots of little small bits that can easily be misplayed, and there's rules that have come up in Facebook discussions, and some of them seem clear to me that they're not classic GW rules, and seem to be against the spirit that I suspect the game is supposed to be played in, without necessarily being majorly offensive misreadings of the rules, or in fact are clear readings of the rules, but maybe need clearing up. There's going to be a decent sized FAQ, but that happens when you've got such a fundamental shift in rules, and to the point where I think I said it last episode, I'm sort of hesitant to say this is 7th edition changed, because it has that familial 7th edition feel, but there almost feels enough change that we just like, let's not say it's based on 7th edition or even on the framework of 7th edition. Like, going back to movement values is a fundamental thing, and like reactions are so fundamentally different, and yeah, we got it to hit chart, but it's not the same as 7th edition. Like, and if you've got a hit to hit chart, you can say, well, actually, let's go back to 2nd edition. Like, so where are you drawing those lines, kind of thing.
I think the description
I'm not
of it
sure.
being the same engine, I think, makes the most sense. But everything on top of it, okay, it's sort of genetically similar, but that's about as far as it goes.
We talked about it last time, didn't we? And it's helpful to a point, but I also think that it overextends that welcome fairly quickly. It
brings its own problems. I think that brings its own problems, because you're coming with preconceptions. as
Yeah,
well. And
absolutely.
yeah, it's why,
You,
as you say, reading the rules is a good idea.
I kept reading Relentless, and I'm like, oh yeah, Relentless, cool. That allows me to do that, and I'm like, hold on,
Yeah,
does it? Because a lot of
you're
rules have
trying to
names
forget
have
what
changed.
you did once know
Yeah,
or think you knew, and that's
exactly.
really quite hard actually.
Yeah, and that's always been the hardest thing. Like the hardest edition changes in reality were the ones where the subtlest changes happened.
Hmm.
Um, but but yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, saw a couple of guys down the club playing yesterday, and I was like, yep. Technically that's not right, and like you could do that, but that's that, and
Mm.
don't be doing that with that guy, and that kind of thing. And even stuff like, because Nature of the Beast of the books, I might have to get some little tags in there to jump to spots.
I've been
Things
thinking
like,
about cheat sheets.
yeah, cheat sheets is a good one. Someone was making one up, but if you're going to use a
Hmm.
cheat sheet, if you're going to use someone else's cheat sheet, double check it.
Yeah, big time.
Because
And even
I've
making your
seen
own, I think that's
Adeptus
an issue.
Titanicus cheat sheets going around, and I've looked at one of the rules and gone, "That's wrong." And they're like, "Is it? This has been out for like a year and a half, and everyone uses it." And I'm like, "Okay, the rest of it might be right, but that one rule's wrong in a way that does change things." So
Wow.
you know, you know that kind of thing. But yeah, cheat sheets are a great idea. And early on, you might only be using X amount of rules or whatever. Like certainly cheat sheets for weapon profiles, like
Hmm.
it's a great idea. It's little things like the unit types and the changes to the rules they provide. Like remembering that actually,
Yeah.
like your charge, your run moves might be affected, and blah blah blah, and all those kind of things.
I want
Your
some
reaction
cards. I want some
movements.
cards or something for reactions. Exactly that. I want to know my options laid out in front of me, just to remind me, because otherwise I'm just going to forget.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. But yeah, no, I can't remember. Did I talk about any games last episode?
I think you may have done one. I think you
Yeah,
had played
I got
one
hammered
game.
up by Kurz, didn't I? I played my mate Giles with his Sons of Horus. I took some Space Wolves again with some Slayers and some Stalkers and Kratos and a mix of things. And that was, I didn't like, it was one of those games where you just didn't roll well.
Hmm.
Little bits and pieces. But the Sons of Horus, the -1 strength when they're charged or charge or whatever it is, like even if they're locked in combat, if someone else charges them, they then get -1 strength
Hmm.
against those weapons. Just staring makes them pretty powerful.
Hmm.
You're running in with regular Terminators. I mean, Space Wolves can have the option of having +1 strength on the charge, or +2 for one turn. I think if you burn it all on Warlord trait and Rite of War, uh, but it's pretty numbing when you charge in and go, oh yeah, I don't, I hit you, I roll poorly to hit you, and then I do 6 wounds, which become 3 wounds
Yeah.
because only kill 3 dudes, and you hit me back and kill 5 dudes. Okay, that's not good.
I've
And
seen
then
a
prime
lot of
up.
people picking up Sons of Horus. I think the color scheme has won a lot of people over, and
Yeah, the
the sort
ability
of
to
them
paint it,
being pushed out.
and they're the big bad, aren't they?
Well,
So
exactly. Yeah, they're quite an appealing. Them, Alpha Legion, and the
lots
Imperial
of
Fists.
Dawn.
Actually,
Yeah,
yeah,
lots of fists. Lots of fists.
not surprising given that they're sort of in the book, if you like.
Hmm. Yeah, Alpha Legion was one, like a lot of Alpha Legion.
Yeah,
And I
myself
think they
included.
stand out. I do
Yeah,
think they stand out. I think that helps. Um, but yeah, no, there's some cool stuff going on. But yeah, no, I think I got tabled in the end by Giles. Yeah, just like the turns I charged in and had my bonuses, just couldn't roll dice, and then slowly got ground down
mm.
as you
Hmm.
do. But yeah, no, it's more about getting games under the belt, getting the rules in the head, like getting an understanding of what's going on,
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah, I agree, and that's going to come in time. But
Yeah,
we'll all pick all those things up. But I think at the moment it's a complete hobby fest. There's just so much of cool stuff going on.
indeed.
It's yeah, and we've got new
Yeah.
contrast paints coming, which I think is
Oh
going to
well, I mean, let's go through it. Like, so we released on the 5th, I think, last month, but we'd had most of it recorded. Um, we've had, so I can't remember exactly when we actually recorded, but we've had Horace. Well, let's go all the way back to 31st of May. Oh, no, it's more than that. Everything you need to get started. Like, thing on salamanders. Thing on the rules changes. Thing on Raven Guard. Yeah, that was finishing off. Art from Horus Heresy's history. The map that they reveal that you can buy, showing off the plastic Leviathan, which is pretty awesome. Only showing off gun model at the moment, but chill.
Yeah. There's been some interesting little adjustments to that model, just tiny little aesthetic choices which I've seen people highlight. But yeah, it's very cool to have that in plastic.
Yeah, it's going to be great to see that on the table. Heaven knows how many I'm going to be. Like way too many, I'm sure I'll buy at some point because that's the nature of the beast.
So cool though, don't they?
Yeah. What if the War Master Horus had actually won? Like, bit of a nice little fluff piece. There's not a lot going on in that, but it was quite cool. What actually came out? I've lost track. So we had all the stuff. That was the release thing. There we go. Getting all confused in my
Mortarian book came along.
Yeah, that should be with me a week. Got mine. Did you get yours?
I'm not collecting those.
Oh,
I know.
There we go. No,
I know. Shocker. I did pick up the collector's edition rulebook.
Did you? Sucker.
And the problem is, I might cancel it. I'm not sure, but it's the same style as the other ones, Greg. So,
but is it the same size as the other ones?
Don't. It'll make me feel physically ill. If it's just subtly different, that would just be awful. But could easily be.
Yeah, that's my problem. Is if it's, I think it's. Yeah, I'm just not bothered by having a collector's edition of a rulebook, which might change in 4 years.
And that might be the realization that I've kind of come to along that.
So I saw someone saying I need to complete my collection of black books, and I'm like,
no.
But it's not a black book. Like the reason the black books, they have like the lore that's in the rule book is basic lore. That's rulebook lore. Someone else was like, it'll maintain value, and I'm like, it won't because it hasn't got anything. Like once a new rule book's been released, it becomes redundant. Where the old black books have all the campaign information and the detailed background of legions and various other bits which are evergreen content.
Whereas
and
a
that's
rulebook is a summary overview, which is going to be republished essentially.
And that's why book 4 and 6 is it, or 4 and 8 are so sought after, because they have some of the coolest campaign systems or whatever in them. So people want them. That's why you can get best part of 400 quid for a book you spent 80 quid on, if you so wished.
So what else? So in terms of actual releases...
let's not talk about releases. Let's talk about a roadmap.
Oh, yes. An actual
something
roadmap.
We've been desperately asking for. My cat has found a dice. Bless him, it's not a mouse. She, sorry. Good girl. So roadmap. So downloadable PDFs. We're getting some of them. So June is all the new stuff and downloadable PDFs. Now,
last day of June tomorrow.
It is, yeah. As we're recording this, we have had a downloadable PDF because we've had a exemplary battle. I hope that doesn't mean an exemplary battle because I hope these keep coming out. It's saying we're getting downloadable. It doesn't say how many either. So
no, it doesn't.
Maybe it is just that.
But it's notable that it's got downloadable PDFs every month till the end of the year. Well, till October.
Till October. I would expect us to carry on a little bit with that.
Yeah.
Liber Mechanicum in August. Oh, she's now found packaging stuff. Oh, she's a right pain. Liber Mechanicum in August, so a little bit of a wait, but I think that's reason. I think 2 months is reasonable. Like, don't get me wrong, it's frustrating if you play Mechanicum. I don't think it's out of the realms of hold on. and Liber Imperium in October, which we're still not 100% sure what else might be in there. So
No.
Mechanicum covers knights.
And
We know
Titans.
that, and Titans, and there's lots of Mechanicum stuff. We'll have there's a lot of the legacy stuff in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Liber Imperium, we're assuming what
Talon, yes. And
Talons.
agents, not that that's really a force. It will presumably
Well,
have agents of
yeah,
the
you've
War
got
Master.
the
Well, no, agents of the Emperor.
yeah, so we're talking things like Rules for Garrow and Rubio in there.
Mm.
Hopefully, assassins
It
would be an
feels
obvious
beyond
thing to put in there.
Talons. I mean, Talons is quite a detailed list, I suppose.
I mean,
I'm just trying to think, how's it going to be as big even as Liber Mechanicum? But I suppose Liber
indeed.
Mechanicum could be. It will almost inevitably be smaller than the Astartes or Hereticus books. I would assume
See,
two-thirds of
this
the
is the
size,
thing.
half the size.
Yeah, I'm just reading the article as well. These will all be supported by Legacies of the Age of Darkness, free downloadable PDFs which contain rules for old Forge World models that aren't present. So there's some kind of suggestion that those PDFs aren't the exemplary battles,
No, these are
but
definitely something else. Yeah.
yes, but those ones it's showing, and we haven't had Dunes yet, as you say,
No.
although it is Heresy Thursday tomorrow, and we got the
Someone did
exemplary
mention,
battle on the Monday, so it
and
suggests that
predictably, when they released that exemplary battle,
mm,
people dived in on social media. Old exemplary battles and units when kind of question marks and things asked in varying degrees of politeness, and I did see them reply to one saying they're coming really soon. They should be
so
around any
again,
time now.
I heard not from any clandestine source or anything like that, but basically as soon as community get around to updating the files,
Right.
right? So it literally is any time soon.
Yeah.
Uh,
And as you say, Heresy Thursday could be a thing.
so yeah, and why would they put that on the month? The exemplary battles were coming out on Heresy Thursdays, so they're obviously saving something else, and that might be to show off of a new model. But they've done plenty on that at the moment. I could see that being then. This is all in the past for listeners, so laugh at us for being wrong. So we've got Demons of the Ruin Storm and the Imperialist Militia and Warp Cults PDFs to come within that system as well. We don't know when. I would like them to be fairly soon. So what else goes in that Liber Imperium, or is it a thin book?
Well, quite. And I mean, Mechanicum.
Solar Auxilia?
There's not a lot. Yes, could do.
Because
they're not covered by
they're not Militia and Warp Cults, are they?
No.
So maybe the
That
Solar
would
Auxilia.
that would start to beef it up because that's quite a hefty list.
Yeah.
When you put that and Talons together, that's quite a lot. Then.
Yeah, that's a decent book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially if you've got again the what are they called? Not Grey Knights. Garrow and Rubio.
The Knights Errant.
Knights Errant. That's the one. So if you've got them as well in there, that's a decent amount. And if they put assassins in, then actually that's a reasonable sized book. But I say, I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. I'm sure in July they'll let us know little bits and pieces. They showed us little bits of the Mechanicum book anyway. But yeah, it's a roadmap. I don't, no matter what our status as a game compared to Age of Sigmar and 40k, I'm not expecting the same speed of releases as them. I'm expecting it to be closer to the big specialist games. Your Blood Bowl, your Necromunda.
Yeah, I could see it being
closer.
A bit quicker. Yeah, Necromunda's probably a good example. Yeah, maybe Blood Bowl. The nature of the plastic kits and the amount of it that there could be makes me think it might be a step up from those.
Yes,
but perhaps not quite
like a happy medium.
Yeah, I could see it being a step up from them because there's just more. There's just more to draw from, certainly for the moment. I could see it for the next year or two even being approaching a 40k and an Age of Sigmar, but it's not as established. And given the popularity that we've had of this release, I could see them throwing a lot of weight behind it, as presumably they've also had time to prepare a bunch of things. But there's a lot to balance. I mean, there's a lot coming for 40k. There's a whole new race coming for 40k, which is a big deal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I'm looking at the Mechanicum list of bits there now. There's a decent amount of stuff in there. As I say, the appendices there, is going to contain a fair amount of stuff because it's missing from the main books, from the main book itself.
Mm.
Interesting that a lot of people talked about it. The Arla Tax Battle Automata maniple is listed in the main thing, not in the appendices, which does seems to suggest there might be a model coming for that, which will be pretty cool if there is. Interesting that the regular knights aren't, they're coming under the appendices rather than they're looking at a knight list down the line, separate, which is fair and understandable. And a pretty good advanced reaction in there. But we've got to. Everything's got to be contextualized by the rules around it. So let's not get OTT on that.
I thought the image they had of the painted force looked particularly good. A lot of these sort of the red painted, some of the bigger knights than the Domitar knights and things. So I thought their robots rather looked pretty cool.
What, in that article?
Yeah. There's some models there we haven't seen painted in that colour scheme before. The Studio Army looks awesome.
Oh no, that's just a Domitar at the back, isn't it?
Yeah, there's two Domitar
there.
Yeah,
there's a Domitar at the back.
There's one there with the back and one further forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, for a second it looked a bit different, just the angle of the photo, I think. It's a cracking picture. I sold on my Mechanicum. I'm pretty sure I am going to buy a few of them back at some point, even if it's just to put in with my Legion army. Like upgrade kits for Dark Angels, these are going to be a thing. These are going to be little drop releases they're going to do. Again, that's good little tick
also
over
interesting
heresy.
to see a made to order entry in the most recent round of previews. You could do made to order things that were out of production.
Iron Warriors chests
and Dark Angels pads for Mark
which is
4,
good.
I think it was. Yeah, which haven't been around for a while.
It's one of those things that if I haven't already got some, it's not something I would jump in on because you don't know when they're going to come back, and if you're short of them, that could cause problems. But if you only want to scatter them around your army, or you've got a load anyway and you need some more, it's fantastic. Yeah. And they will, they can always come back. Again, it's just a nice little thing. Like GW's giving you more stuff. Like it's no point moaning about them giving you options.
No, and I think, as you say, it's just quite nice to see that if you wanted to finish up. It's not really wildly popular, but it's there. But we're starting to see those kinds of things. So what else have we seen? We've seen the Leviathan, the Sakaran, and the New Contemptor.
New Contemptor with what? 8 different guns?
Well, it's got all the weapons, so it's presumably what you get in the Age of Darkness box, plus an extra sprue.
1 ultra posable Contemptor, 2 heads, 4 chest plate styles with loyalist and traitor options, 2 big old punchy hands, buildable as fists or chain fists, 5 different guns to go in the fists, 8 different arm-mounted guns usable on right or left side, Havoc missile launcher, shield and scroll details to smarten up your chassis. So you buy 2 boxes of this, and you've got Contemptors for days.
Yes. But it must be the same. One of those weapon sprues must be the same as the one we got in the Age of Darkness, and then the rest of the weapons are coming on a separate sprue. It is.
And the second fist.
Yeah, I would assume.
And more chest plates.
Yes, I would. So it might be 2 additional sprues.
Yeah, it might be a double sprue. There's a lot of stuff on there. Bearing in mind those guns are all going to be at least, 3 parts. I would have thought 2.
Oh yeah, at least. Yeah.
So
I would imagine, and we've got no idea, but I would imagine they are going to, like Titanicus, they might well do a direct only, order the weapon sprue only.
Maybe.
It's a maybe. But I think
the difference is that was a shock with Titanicus, and it felt like that was a reply to the shock. Whereas this seems to be like, and the price difference as well. Like a Contemptor, I don't think people are going to moan as much when it comes to a Contemptor, because again, you can swap guns. So I buy a Contemptor and I want twin autocannon. You buy a Contemptor and you want twin las cannon. We do a deal. Whereas with the Warlord thing was a bit different.
From game to game, you're going to want to change it. I would say that's true of a Contemptor. Perhaps
within
not as
reason,
much.
but you've
Yeah,
got a
all right.
lot more
Perhaps not as
options.
much.
Yeah, and because you've got 8 guns on there,
Mm.
and the price difference between how much is a Warlord Titan?
50,
Yeah,
60.
how much was a Contemptor? 30.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
We
like
don't know
30.
yet, but yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
no,
Yeah.
around 30
Mm.
becomes like people are going to complain less, and they're just
Yeah.
going to
Okay.
go, "Oh, I'll buy another Contemptor."
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see that spare.
Okay.
I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me either way.
Of all the things, that would be the only thing I could. Well, rather of all the kits, that's the one I could see them doing a direct only weapons brew, because I was
Yes,
surprised to see things like the
potentially.
Necromunda vehicle that came out with its
Also,
extra direct only cupola
yeah.
weapons, for example. So yeah, could see
Also,
it.
dreadnoughts have always been cool
Mm.
and have always sold well. There was a dreadnought Rite of War in the old list, but it was fairly. If you wanted any chance of winning the game, you probably avoided it. Now, the Rite of War is not so damaging, and contemptors have suddenly got pretty good. So I can imagine a lot of people just going, "Yeah, I'll buy 5, or
Mm.
I'll have 5 in my
That's my
army."
army. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite a
So
nice. I mean, I've seen people discuss this as well. People with things like knight armies. So if you're playing a multi-game weekend or something like that, there's something to be said for only having a handful of models that you're having to move around, which is kind of the thing you get with that, rather than I've got 100 and something infantry to think about, all with individual
oh, for sure.
capabilities and rules. Or no, I've got 6 dreadnoughts.
I went to a I went to an Age of Sigmar event with 4 models. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah, I've seen this with knight households and things where people have talked about that. Where I've got my 3 knights, and it's easier for me to just deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, got all that. What was really interesting. So we know that book 7 of the Siege of Terror series is coming soonish.
Now it's a interesting question whether that's going to come, because we've got Dawn's Primarch book
Yeah,
coming.
as well.
We've got Sanguinius's Primarch book, surprisingly was announced
Yeah,
as well. Going to be written by the excellent Chris Wright as well, which is particularly exciting. And as you say, we've got Siege of Terror. Whether the next Siege of Terror book comes before or after the Sanguinius book will be an interesting thing. I'm assuming it's going to come before.
I think so because of the announcement. Like we saw the cover of Echoes of Eternity a while ago. The Sanguinius has only just been released, so shown off. So I assume we're getting Echoes of Eternity
I think
within a couple of months, month or two.
I thought I'd seen it suggested that it would be quite useful to read the Sanguinius book
Suggested
to
by
appreciate
whom?
something in there. Well, that's the issue. It's it's too far removed. I thought I'd. This is going to sound, even saying it aloud sounds dubious. Where I thought I heard someone say that it had been said on Warhammer Community, but clearly it hadn't, because I would have picked up on it that way. I'm sure if
Yeah,
I'd have picked up
yeah,
on it
that
there.
sounds.
Hearing someone else quote it from there is beyond dubious. So yeah, I'm not going to stick with that. No, just
And
as you say,
also,
the reveal sequence just suggests it'll be out in that order.
yeah, exactly. What is interesting is they've announced Book 8,
Yes, and there was a
which,
little article about it. Yeah.
yeah, a little interview with Dan. The End and the Death, Book 8. What? Yeah, so normally GW and Black Library don't like to show us too far in advance. There's normally like a 3-month-ish window,
Hmm.
give or take. Some things get delayed. Looking at you, Carbander, who's been delayed a long time now because he was shown off in the end of January. And it's rare for something to be that long shown off.
Hmm.
We've had 2 Primarchs books announced. Well, 1 released now, Mortarion. 2 more announced. Book 7's been announced. Book 8 has been announced. I wonder if Book 7 and Book 8 are going to come out relatively close together,
Hmm. Hmm.
like within months of each other.
I could see them coming within a
A
3 to 6
quarter.
month window.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is quick for heresy books,
Very, yeah.
and particularly for some of the delays we've had. I know that Dan and Aaron had talked a lot between the books.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dan and Aaron talk a lot anyway. So, but obviously writing two books together, this again, and the whole crew have talked together as well. It's not like just those two. And I think it would be good. I think it would be a really good idea to have them out like fairly close to each other so we can get to that ending. What will be really hard is we're still on. They're still doing the limited edition. You don't get the other books released. They have done it recently for some books.
They have.
I don't think they'll do it for the Siege books, which will be it would be really nice if for the last book they released all the editions at the same time, so everyone could read it at the same time.
Yeah.
And everyone could talk about it at the same time.
That one in particular feels like that could be an opportunity. They did it with Chthonia's Reckoning, didn't they?
Yeah, that's the one
that
I was
quite
trying
the
to think
same.
of.
Yeah.
No, it's very different, and that's a special edition rather than a limited edition.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I think they did it with another book recently. Could be wrong. But I don't think they'll do it. But like the one thing you want to do is talk to people about these books when they finished, and if what I've heard is true, there's going to be a lot in the end and the death that's going to, like, a lot of, in quotation marks, like facts or information. How reliable it all is and all that kind of jazz that goes with it. But there's a lot of details in there that may be more than we would have expected when we knew they were going to write this story.
Yes.
So a lot to talk about, and it will be all over Reddit and whatever. You can go and find it all out if you want to do it that way. But I definitely, that's going to be that weekend will be cleared, and I will get that book and I will read, and I will read and read and read, so that it doesn't get spoiled for me. What I'll probably do is actually pick up the book, read a bit, fall asleep. But I will do my best to read it. But I thought that was quite big, because
that is
also
exciting. That's coming now.
Yeah, and that'll be the Horus Heresy series done, which will be weird. Will be in a weird space, but they've shown with Chthonia's Reckoning, and they've shown with the character series books that we will be getting more heresy stuff going forwards, just not in the series numbered format.
No.
But it's kind of crazy to think that we're going to get to the end after 16 years.
Yeah.
Is it 16?
It must feel even weirder being the people involved with. I mean, they touched on it in the in the various bits, don't they? They touch on it in the in interviews, and it must be so strange to have been working on that for so long.
25th of April 2006, Horus Rising was released. So crazy shizzle. Looking forwards to that. What else was there? It was weird to have this much stuff to talk about on the show. With 8 years I've been doing this.
Contrast. I mean, it's not heresy specific, but new contrast paints. So, particularly given all the hobby excitement around at the moment, I think that's a big deal.
I am not a good enough painter to be invited to a contrast weekend all day, and that's fair. There's some really interesting paints. So the washes some of the washes formulas have been changed. They're getting rid of the glosses. Must admit, I did go and buy a few gloss paints.
Yes, I haven't actually been able to find Nuln oil gloss. I was tempted to pick up another one of those. I did pick up an Agrax.
Need to find those little shops. I was in Canterbury and walked into a independent, and they didn't have much Reekland and Flesh Shade. They had some Nuln. But find those little shops. Oh yeah, Blood Bowl trophies are made to order at the moment as well. That's a big one. Tempted. The new, so the shades look cool, and some new shades as well on there. The contrast themselves,
because they are redoing the entire range of shades and then adding to them.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
They're reformulating the existing shades, as you say. The gloss ones go completely. The existing Rohypnol oil, Agrax, Reichland, they're being reformulated. Now, I've seen a couple of those who have been given them as previews talk about them in detail, and they said it's actually done what some people have been asking for, people who've been using them, which is essentially use the contrast formulation
Yeah.
but in a wash format, so it's a heavily thinned version,
Less
which
pooling.
they said is really good. Yeah, far
Yeah.
less, and it's less of a staining kind of
Yeah.
application, and it does just wash into there. And they said generally the reviews I've seen have been very
Which
positive.
is a shame because sometimes I use them to stain.
And therein lies the issue: is that those reformulated ones, in some cases, are actually a slightly different shade or color.
Yeah.
So that's something just to be mindful of. I don't think it's massively significant, but if
No.
if painting is your thing, it's something to be aware of,
I
particularly if
need
you're
to go.
very particular about a color scheme.
Yeah, I need to go and look at some of the local shops and buy up a few pots of various different things, or make a workaround for it.
Mm.
But if I can just stockpile a few, I don't have to make that workaround for a while, do I? So that's fine. The contrast paints, there's some kind of revisited like versions of older paints. Um, some look amazing, though I did see someone talking about they look less contrasty. Like,
They are some of them. One of the things that Contrast, when it was launched, was put forward, I think, which I was slightly surprised at, but I can kind of see where they were coming from. They launched them as a sort of beginner's paint. They were, hey, look how much easier it makes painting your models. You just put on one coat and it saves you a whole other step.
yeah,
Yeah, to a point, but I think they were actually quite a relatively advanced product to
oh
use. And
yeah,
I
they
think they took
definitely
a
were. They,
bit of a while to kind of figure out
mm,
actually where they really shone. And I think people have done since. One of those aspects is that they are actually quite a translucent by definition, by the way they work. They're quite translucent. Some of these, not so much. Some of these are much more opaque. The red,
yeah,
the
and
purple,
yeah.
at the very
But
least, and the
alongside
black.
that, if you look at, say, I'm just having a little look through, like Iron Jaws yellow. No, that seems to do it a little bit more. The other yellow, I think it was.
The Imperial
Bad
Fist
Moon.
one, Bad Moon, and the
Yeah,
Imperial Fist one. When you see those tried out, are serious business.
but they
They
don't
really have got
seem to
incredible coverage.
contrast. They don't seem to
No,
contrast as much. And by that I mean having a stain and a wash effect
yes, a shade and a highlight,
into a
effectively.
shade and a
Yeah,
highlight within two. They seem to just be very good coverage, bright, vivid paints.
I think that's
Whereas,
particularly true of the purple and the red.
sure, yep, potentially, yeah, and I don't think it'll be until you see them up close.
Yeah,
Like something like Mantis Warrior Green does seem to contrast quite well. Um, Gut Ripper Flesh a little bit. What's really interesting is some of the very pale off-white ones.
there's going
Or
to be some really interesting ones there. That Briar Cream Chill, I think, can look really cool.
yep, Briar Green and the Glacier Pearl Glacier. Like
Yes,
that one really seems to gather in the
I am
corners.
itching to get my hands on the Croxagore Scale and the Eldari Emerald for Alpha Legion. I really want to try those through an airbrush for them. I think that those two, in varying combinations, could make some really cool teal green, blue green
All
shades.
right, yeah,
Possibly a little bit too saturated, but let's give it a go.
exactly. No, there's some really, I say, really interesting things. The Soul Blight Grey shade for white
Mm-hmm.
paint,
Mm-hmm.
like you know that old adage of like no undercoat showing. It's like, well, what a stupid rule that is now,
Yeah.
because I'm just going to spray it white
Now,
and
now it's a key part of the system.
just dip it.
And speaking of spray it white,
And then
new
you
spray paint.
formulate
Yeah.
white, yeah. Which, like, and I know like Citadel paints are not as cheap as many alternatives. Um,
Not
what
that
they
there's as
are
many alternatives out there as
as the
some might think, but there are.
no,
Yeah, there are
but
alternatives.
you can go down to Halfords
Yeah,
and get
yeah.
grey spray paint and stuff, and I've done that for a project, and that's cool. However, if I put that Halfords can too close to my model, I've got to do some quick work to make sure it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't clog everything up. And Citadel, man, I've sprayed when it's been damp, I sprayed when it's been cold, when it's been warm. I've got models too close to the spray
Pretty
can.
bulletproof, aren't they? Yeah.
They are just fantastic. Like, I can count on one hand the amount of issues I've had with Citadel spray paints, and I've been using them for best part of 30 years.
I'm looking at a number of airbrush primers here, and I have done it. Does it bring enough of a benefit over just getting a can of Chaos Black? I'm not sure it does. I stand by Cult of Paint's point. That old reliable, just start off with a basic spray paint like that. It's just quicker. Without
Yeah,
getting
and
through a stage that you just have to do.
I remember when I was undercoating with my airbrush, and the cleaning work was so much more than it was with other airbrush paints. But,
of the new shades, I actually think that grey one you were talking about, the Soul Blight Grey, is the most interesting. When you look at those preview ones, the blue one's cool, but that grey one, it could be some really cool combinations
I
of
quite
that
like
with the Apothecary one as well.
Poxwalker. Poxwalker's the really dull.
That's very. No, it's actually a surprisingly bright.
Oh no, that's the greeny one. Okay, so it's the Croak Green, which is the really kind of just very light, almost pastel-y green. That one looks interesting depending on what you're doing.
Mortarian Grime is going to be interesting. I could see people using that a lot in Heresy, particularly for that more weathered look. Well, I mean, these are almost going to serve the role of a pin wash.
Mortarian Grime, is added to the Nuln Oil kind of like the Reekland Flesh Shade, depending on which colours you're doing, becomes another one of those 4 weathering shades.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Which is really good.
But this reformulation, when you see the side-by-sides, and you mentioned Juan's YouTube channel, there's some very good comparisons there about what the difference is between the old shades and the new ones. And I saw one person suggest that it will take the place of, well, not take the place, but it certainly goes some way to suggesting it's going to be effective like a pin wash would do, an oil pin wash type thing. And you think, okay, that's quite appealing to just do that.
Not Liam. Wargamer Pete did a good video with them as well. Having a little look at them, talking through various of them. And my missus walked in while I was watching it, and she was like, "He's really good at this." I was like, "Yes, he is." And not all YouTubers are. But he has a very good way of putting across information.
He did an excellent video on that, actually.
Yeah. Absolutement. Anything else? I mean, that's plenty.
I mean, that's all the things. Yeah.
There's plenty, and it's not stopping. Like, we're going to get loads more. We know we've got the Leviathan to actually be released, like the Sakaran to be released. We're waiting on that the Proteus Carrier, or the 2 versions of it.
Because that
Land Raider
is it's pretty. It appears that that's in the Hereticus book or Astartes book.
If you that is a new model. Like, you can see the differences in the model, and the Spartan kit is obviously like, it's got Land Raider on some sprues. Like, logical leaps aren't particularly big.
So I assume that the kit that they show, that is, as you say, is clearly a new model in the Astartes book, is the Proteus Explorator, I think, which is the current resin Proteus Land Raider. So presumably the Land Raider Carrier is going to have an assault ramp, because it has an assault ramp in the unit entry, similar to what the Spartan has, which will be a form of Land Raider we haven't seen yet.
It does. It just needs a door on the front piece. That's all it needs.
Yeah, but it's an assault ramp.
An assault ramp. Just
which would be cool.
Yeah, I would assume
just to see what that variation is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like the ability to pick up those. Yeah, will be fantastic. I've been looking at using them instead of Spartans in some of my lists. Be interesting. But there's lots of cool stuff to come, and that's before I say they're going to keep dropping in. They've done a few of the Legion upgrades, sprues kind of thing. Like we're going to get one for each Legion. And at some point they're going to extend beyond this, and we're going to get characters, and we're going to get the odd unit come out, and it's exciting, fun times. And they've got new, we got new gun types. Like hopefully at some point we're going to get Nemesis bolters. So because everyone's hurriedly trying to convert them or make them different or whatever.
They are the new hotness.
They are.
I mean, it's just
interesting.
would it be logical, wouldn't it, that they're gonna do a plastic set or possibly upgrade? I mean, I still think the weapons upgrades to make the heavy squads and the tactical support squads are brilliant. I think it's superb that they just tack onto the tactical squad.
I was driving around yesterday thinking, do I need brass rod and maybe plastic card tubing, to make, start cutting it up small for Nemesis bolters? How am I going to do it? Other people have done it with other guns from other 40k armies and stuff. I'm like, do I? I don't know.
Or is it just going to be a case of are they going to release? Because it'd be quite cool to have the recon squad. I think.
Kit.
But I think there's other kits that come before that. Breaches, which seems an obvious one, and assault. You do a troop choice before you do the recon squad. I would have thought.
Maybe. I mean, there are troop choice. You can take.
Are they?
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, you're almost certainly right.
I think
I'm
they are
showing my lack of knowledge.
They might not be line, but I think they're a troops choice.
That's probably where I'm getting.
And this is part of the new kind of system, isn't it?
They're not going to be elite, are they?
No.
Could be fast attack, but that's not headhunters.
Because I put them in
seekers.
Here's a bit of information for you. If you use an Apple device, an iPhone or an iPad, you can now get Quartermaster with an up-to-date Heresy army list builder.
They've released that for Quartermaster. Oh, wow.
Yep.
Because
I started to make my own, and they made some decisions that I kind of was thinking I'd have to do, but I tried not to. When your Legion Praetor has to be a Legion Praetor, and then a Cataphracti has a different profile, and a Tartarus has a different profile, and because you get an extra wound with Terminator armor, but then Cataphracti and Tartarus are different as well, so you have to put in separate entries for all the three of those. Oh, and then he can have a bike. Oh, and then he can have a jump pack, and they also change their speed. They decided to go with just adding those rules on, which is sensible, but it's a big task. There's a lot of information to put on, but having an actual app to write lists is great fun, for sure. Troops, tactical, despoiler, breacher, assault, reconnaissance, tactical support squad, and Legion Scout squad. I haven't even really looked at.
Is it Scout squad and recon squads can take Nemesis bolts?
I'm just checking.
Sniper rifles.
So reconnaissance squads can, and Scout squads can. Yep.
Okay.
So lots of different options in there. And vets. Vets can have them as well, can't they? Because I was looking at having a Pride of the Legion army, so vets became troops as well. Pretty sure vets can't they? Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, no, they can, 10 points each. Yeah. So you can have quite a few. If you so wish. I think that's an idea which will soon get squashed, because you're going to run into some stuff where you've spent a lot on the extra points for those Nemesis bolters, and then the Typhon's going to drop its template on you and tell you to get lost and that kind of thing. But I think although it appears that tanks aren't the favourite thing at the moment, I think there's an element of so there's always a meta, whether you believe in meta within games or not. There's always a meta. That meta isn't necessarily about what's strong or weak. It's about what's played in your area. or wherever the meta is you're considering, and that affects what other people bring. And sometimes that meta becomes really left field, and then the counters to it become slightly left field as well. So I could see that people go, oh no, there's no point taking tanks, and they move away from it. And then all of a sudden people don't start taking anti-tank weaponry, and then all of a sudden tanks come back because they're invincible. That kind of thing. Okay, so back when we were talking in the intro, I said we'll leave that and we'll come back to it and talk about what's going on, because we've got a new game system. We've got a new core system on how to play Heresy. We've got also an influx of new players, and we've got a mix of players anyway within the game, and we always have. And there are aspects of this game which I think require a little bit of we're learning a new game, so I think there's an element of, first off, first 6 months of this game. Like I've played 2 games at the club so far. I've got a game next week. I've got an intro game the week after that, and I've had this before where people have played and they're trying to look for the best move out of the game, out of the gate. And I'm like, just do stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is our first time playing this edition of this rules. Like, just keep trying stuff. Make different units. Like, why are you worried about winning at this point? And I think it's important to remember an aspect of that. I was listening to a podcast, and they're a podcast that doesn't like 5-game events. They like 4-game events. I'm kind of against it. I'm like, I've paid to come away and play Heresy. I want to play 5 games over a weekend. We can communicate with each other and have a chat afterwards, and you. I firmly believe that you can get a game in a 2.5 hour to 3 hour time slot with ease if you just give it a little bit of effort. And then you can still have time to converse and talk to each other. It shouldn't be too stressful. But and someone on that was like, no, like right at the start of this game, I want to be playing as many games as possible. If I go away for a weekend, just ram as many in as I can fit in. And they were like, but you're all learning the rules. And I do agree. I think if I was running an event in the first 6 months of this game being out, I'd be running fewer games, should I say, and longer times in those games to learn rules, or reducing the points down. But there are inherent issues with doing that.
Sometimes that doesn't optimize. It doesn't scale necessarily.
No, but also people then find little loopholes and create things that don't necessarily work, and also you don't get to test out as much stuff.
I think for local games, friendly games, that makes sense. For events, slightly different. But I think starting out with smaller points values can be useful if you're completely new to that game. I should just in general, actually, I think it could be quite good just to.
Think so. I played the first game. We played 2,000 points.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, and we had, our club starts at 7. And we can go on fairly late, so we can be there for 4 hours, 4 hours. So, like, it didn't really matter. Like, so it's cool. Yeah, crack on. We can play 2,000 points. And actually, I'd had the book longer than most people as well, so there's a bit of a chance to look at some stuff and all that kind of thing. So, had a rough idea. Still getting lots of rules wrong. Still looking up lots of rules and things like that. Playing next week, we've agreed to kind of go to 2,500 points because we have some of those basics down. We're still going to be learning a lot, but again, we've got a lot of time at the club. I think there's I used to have this we used to play board games. I used to review board games for an independent Warhammer magazine, and one of the guys who joined us, sometimes reviewing the board games or playing, so we could review them, it was his first time playing a game, and he was like, "No, I need to know all my options," and I'm like, within reason, yes, but this is your first time playing this game. You're not going to understand the nuances of the strategy first time. It's not going to happen. there's too much going on to be able to do that. Sometimes you've just got to make the decision.
I can understand a nervousness about uh, diving into a game. It depends how regularly you're playing a game. The more frequently you can play the games, I think the more that addresses that issue. But there might be a nervousness of thinking, well, I don't get to play very often. If I play and I'm at a substantial disadvantage, I'm not going to enjoy it in the same way. That is a mindset. I think that's one
Yeah,
we want to try and say, don't worry about that too much, because we're all starting out and people are not going to be
and you should be helping
at
each
a
other,
platform.
particularly early
Yeah,
on.
yeah, that's the
Like,
social contract, isn't it? Yeah,
you should be going, it's right, we're learning this game, let me look that up for you while
yeah,
we're doing that. Like, I'm thinking about
100%.
doing this, how does that work? Um,
There's a really
lots of,
nice event happening in London. I think there's a sort of a what is it, a boot camp type event
yeah,
is taking place at Bad Moon, which just looks like that's going to be quite good. Where I think the idea is to get a group of people who are looking to refresh or looking to start it up completely new, and it's to get those people together to sort of help each other out and move through it. And I think that's a really nice way to dive into that. I'd imagine there's going to be a fair few in groups around the countries that might take that on and be in a
yeah,
similar position.
yeah. If you're at a club as well, like having um, 2 or 3 tables, put them next to each other. So when you're playing your game and you're like, oh, guys, we just found this rule. Did you know? Like, in this circumstance, this happens.
Mm.
Or, oh, we're struggling with this rule. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I've just looked that one up. Like, all that kind of stuff works
Mm-hmm.
really well together. Um, and it's little reminders and things like that. Night fighting, -1 ballistic skill to hit. Like, how often am I going to forget that? I think that'll probably be one I forget a lot, even once I know
Mm-hmm.
the rules, you know. But there's a lot going on. Once you've been in the game for a while, I think a lot of it's can become just fixed knowledge in your head.
Yeah.
Like, this does this, that does that. Because on top of learning all those unit rules, you've then got all the Legion um, specific rules, and then the Legion specific advanced reactions, the basic reactions to try and remember. Um, I don't think it's a major issue, and I think uh, when you're when you're trying to get used to the game, the first thing you need to do is concentrate on your own rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if your opponent's opposite you playing Thousand Suns, you've never played them before, just ask for a rough idea. But like, just concentrate on getting your rules down, because once your rules are down, you can then expand from there. I think that's pretty solid advice. But helping each other out is a big thing. Like, heads in books and all that. As you say, cheat sheets, like reference cards,
Yeah.
like for having the weapons laid out, like, would be a brilliant idea. It's almost a shame they didn't produce like one of those with just the Space Marine weapons as a handout. Would be a fantastic like thing to have laminated by your play table.
They're going to start to exist, aren't they? But I mean, it's fairly
Yeah, they will.
straightforward. It's
Yeah,
going to they'll start to appear if they aren't already. I haven't seen any specific. I've seen people starting to produce spreadsheets that they're sharing or Google Sheets that they're sharing that allow people to do army lists and things. And I think I could see that happening with the weapons. And as we said earlier, always worth checking them just to be sure. Particularly if you go downloading
definitely
it, just
worth
let then
checking them.
spend rather than put the time in to create your own. Put the time in just to check the one that you've downloaded is quite useful. But just to have your own weapons listed out, something that makes the game flow easier. I remember when we played. Oh goodness me, was it Heresy? I think it was Heresy. Probably about 5 years ago. Some friends and I would, and there was a couple of people picking it up for the first time. We were really getting into it. We were playing a massive game, and we thought, well, to speed this up, to stop us looking through and flicking through rulebooks, we printed out a load of sheets with the rules in, photocopied the pages, and pinned them up around my friend's living room. So you could just look on the wall. Right, let's just look through this. There's things like that. If you can just look through the special rules section like that, that speeds things up very nicely rather than having to
Yeah,
look through
and the
stuff.
nature of units, like having quick access to which units you've got, because it's the little subtle things that it's like, oh, how fast do they move again? Like,
Yeah,
all
exactly.
that kind of stuff, all those little bits and pieces that if you've got there laid out in front of you can really help. Or tags on your rulebook will be the other big one, because
Mm.
like trying to find the special rules section in is it the rule book that really annoys me, or is it the Liber? I think it's the Liber that really annoys me, just because it's not quite where I think it should be.
Yes, or you sort of think this could be one of two places. It's always going to be in the other place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm continually surprised that melter bombs are an exotic and melee weapons or something like that, not grenades. Now, they're obviously not a grenade, so that sort of makes sense, and yet I sort of lump it in
Yeah,
my head with crack
absolutely. Yeah,
grenades,
because
and you
you can
think,
use
well,
crack grenades. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, those little bits and pieces are a fantastic way. One other thing is what's really interesting is so we talked earlier, saw people questioning some rules and what should we do, and there's some people who seem very keen to take a leading role in FAQs on Facebook, which it's quite interesting. But
Mm,
hey, whatever. There are some things that do need to be cleared up that seem like there's a correct answer, but there's no harm making sure that's clear. And there's some other stuff that is a little bit like, does that work that way?
mm,
We will be getting, we will be getting an FAQ soon. I am absolutely sure of that. But there are people coming into the game with, well, there's always been that thing like, what is a heresy gamer? Like, does having does caring about the rules mean you're not a narrative gamer?
mm,
Right, which is always a classic, and it doesn't. Like, if you're playing a game, like, and you're playing to a set of rules and the person's not, that can create negative play experiences, whether you're playing highly competitive or narrative.
mm,
Like, those kind of things happen. Um, we then also have potentially that we do have people who are more competitive,
mm,
who are playing the game, and that's cool. That's fine. I think it's always good to have that chat again. Like, if you don't know your opponent, it's one of these things where actually, if you're in a club or you have a close knit gaming group, it's very rarely an issue because you know the players you're playing against.
mm,
Now, whether that means you have to change your play style because someone can't change theirs, at least you know that going in. And there are
mm,
people at my club I will not play because we're in different places, and that's fine. If you're going to a tournament or an event, the event or tournament should lay out what kind of event it is and the expectations. The problem is when you go to a club or a new club, or you're playing someone in a pickup game in a store or something like that. That's when the real problems come because their view on what's competitive might be completely different to
mm,
yours. So you get this real kind of conflict potentially there, and that's where having a bit of a conversation about the type of games you play, and someone being, oh yeah, no, cool, whatever. If we get to a situation, we'll kind of resolve it.
mm.
Whereas the other person's like, no, we'll look up the rules and we'll do it
Yeah,
how
I'd
it
like
should
to
be.
learn how to play this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or just I'm playing a game with a rule set, so I want to use the rule set.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. I think it's particularly in those environments, it becomes more important to kind of work out what kind of game's going on.
Mm,
And I think that's doubly important now with reactions.
mm-hmm.
So if I'm playing you and I go and move one dreadnought, two dreadnoughts, three dreadnoughts that quickly,
Yeah.
like, you go, hold on, I wanted to react to dreadnought number two. And
Mm.
you're like, well, if you reacted to dreadnought number two, I might
I
not have
wouldn't
moved
have done
dreadnought
this, and
number
suddenly got
three.
unrolling.
Right,
Yeah.
suddenly you're getting into a point there where what do you do? And is it a case of when we're moving units, when we're shooting at other units, every time there's a possibility of a reaction, like, where's the line, and what do you do? Do you say, I'm moving this, would you like to react to that? Right.
Yeah.
There are times that that's a very good thing to say. Or do you just move something, wait a bit, move something else, like, and then you get into a grey area of like, actually, yeah, or can I, what, blah blah. Again, if you're playing with your best mate who you know very well, you'll have a clear understanding on what you kind of allow and don't allow. What's really interesting is having seen some people really say, oh, that's a competitive gamer issue thing. And I actually think 90% of competitive gamers will handle it better than narrative gamers
Mm, mm,
because it's the nature of what they do at the table. Now, you will always see the worst cases of competitive play blow up because that's the nature of the beast. Let's look at LVO, 3 years ago now. $5,000 given to a guy because he accepted another player acting like a jerk.
Mm.
And the instance was there was an agreement that the player actually talked out his turn, put some models down, and just said, "Can I put these down here?" Like and went off to do something else. And he said, "Actually, you've deep strike now, so that's the end of your turn. You can only deep strike at the end of your turn." The bloke's like, "That was clearly not the intent. We clearly talked about it." He's like, "But you did it, so I'm calling it." Right?
Mm.
That's a player issue. That person who's being not a particularly nice person. Um, what what you would hope and what happens 90% of the time is that bloke goes, "Yeah, stuff it. Yeah, it's out of sequence, but we know what you're doing. That's fine.
Mm.
Crack on, do it." Now you can't. Unfortunately, that circumstance is kind of, if that person's going to be that way, there's not a lot you can do about it with those kind of people. Whereas I play, so I at my club is a guy called Jack Armstrong who's won 2 Age of Sigmar World Cups now, whatever they're called, the Worlds now.
Mm.
Plays top level Age of Sigmar, and what he'll do is he'll talk through stuff. And what I've learned from being on the top games is we'll talk through stuff. Like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. If I do this, can you do that? I'm doing this, so you can't do that, right? And then actually on the opposite side of the table, if he moves something and says, "I'm moving this model, so you can't react to it," and I say, "Well, actually, Jack, I've got a rule that allows me to react further, blah, 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 blah,
Mm.
blah," right? You are being proactive within that space.
Mm.
Proactive sports, um, yeah, sports personships, proactive good sporting behaviour is
Mm.
becoming a thing in the American 40k and world's 40k scene as well.
Mm.
To the point where I've talked about this before at the Worlds or whatever the 40k team does now. Um, the judge has walked up to a table before and said, "You are technically correct to call this to call this rule out, and if you call it out, I will have to side with you. However, I will also give you a yellow card because it's not in the spirit of the game you're playing."
Mm.
Right,
That's a really
which is
interesting
like
way of tackling it. Yeah.
which is a great answer because technically correct, like, but
I like the "if you choose to do this"
yeah,
because it
absolutely.
still gives an
You have the
option,
option.
which is what's
Yeah,
really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
You are being a jerk. I am giving you an option to not be a jerk.
You're technically
However, if you
correct, but the
wish to be a
technically is
jerk,
crucial. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, there's a
Yeah.
level of understanding. And I've been at events where, um, it's always a classic when the models have come on the wrong side of the table, and people forget they're there and go, "Oh, I was going to charge with them," and I'm
Mm.
like, "Dude, all I've done is moved 3 units. Like, I haven't even moved the unit you were going to charge. Let's just do it
Yeah.
because you told me you were going to charge them."
And that's the beauty of talking these things through. That can slow, depending on the game, that can make it a slower game. So you've got
Shouldn't
there's a
do
balance. No, it shouldn't, but it can because
because it
if you're
saves time in
agonising
other
over it,
places.
fair. Yeah.
Because what you do is, again, used to happen a lot in Warhammer. I want to move this unit up, and this is what I want to achieve. And I've seen Ben Curry do this. Actually, it was the first time I encountered it against me. I was trying to move a unit up. I was measuring everything. He said, "Greg, what are you trying to do?" I said, "I'm trying to do X," and he went, "Right." And he got his tape measure out from the other side, and he went, "Here, here, here. You can't be anywhere here. You can't be here. So you can be here, 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 or here." And all of a
Mm.
sudden, I went from 100 options down to 7,
Mm.
and that sped my play up. And the amount of times now I'm like, when I see someone putting a finger out to measure to then move models to, I'm like, screw it, I'll put my finger down
Mm.
and I'll do it for you. Or I'll measure my, okay, you don't want to be within reaction range. Cool. Here's 12 inches from the closest model. So you can move up right in front of that. All those things are proactive actions
I
that help
suspect
the
this.
game move smoothly.
I was watching a game take place the other day between some friends, and this was pre 2.0, and one person was deep striking in a unit of Terminators next to or into within range of a certain Talons unit. That Talons unit had something that
Yeah,
made
disruptors.
perils.
Yeah,
That's it. The person deep striking was unaware of that,
sure.
and then the person, so he was deep striking it, and the person said, "Oh, I've got this. This
Yeah,
applies." The person deep striking said, "Ah, now that I know that, I'm going to deep strike them further away."
yeah,
Is that okay? Is that
yeah.
part of that
Absolutely.
proactive
I
thing?
believe.
Say
Yeah,
that.
I believe that is. Uh, that's information that is out there. That is, it's not hidden information
Mm-hmm.
within the game.
It
It's
avoids a
information that's
gotcha.
out there.
That to me seems to be the
Yeah. So
the,
this
the
is it.
key.
It
If you've got
avoids
a
a
gotcha
negative play
moment,
experience. And
yeah.
the problem with reactions, particularly advanced reactions, is there's an element of gotcha within them.
Mm.
So it's easy to forget if you play, like, there are 18 legions. 2 of those legions that I know of, Imperial Fist and Space Wolves, can charge you in your movement phase.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty big kind of I've got out of here kind of moment.
Mm.
So I will explain that at the start of the game. Have you played Space Wolves before? No. Cool. Okay, my advanced reaction is if you move, I can then move and then charge. And blah, 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 blah. So that is an option I have as a reaction. Cool, no
Mm-hmm.
worries. Now, what and I might bring that out every now and then if someone's like, I'm going to move up and charge those guys, and be like, okay, just remember, at some point I can do that with any one of my units. The problem is, where's the line? Because any of my units can move away from you. Do I have to keep reminding you that? Probably not, because
Mm.
that's a base reaction. Uh, but when you're calling it is an interesting thing because it matters. Because I might move a unit trying to draw that reaction out. If you don't do it, I then might not move up another unit.
Mm.
So you have to be aware. Both players, the reacting player has to be aware of what they're doing. The acting player has to be able to be prepared to give enough time to allow reactions, but not too much time. You like try and sure you don't want to use a reaction, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a level of communication there. And when you're moving, if you've moved 12 units, like, it's hard to go back to the first one if that will honestly change your other moves. Because if
Mm.
you move up and someone reacts and that's their reaction move gone, you might go, cool, brilliant. Well, now that's out of the way. I can actually concentrate on that side and push units past and what have you. But you've removed units, so then you're having to move them back and then move them to another position, and all of a sudden, actually, that unit's gone 15 inches. It's only got a 6-inch move.
Mm.
It's moved around. That kind of thing becomes a problem. Shooting back at units becomes an interesting thing, and it might be a case of I've moved this unit up, and the classic kind of example could be I've moved this unit up. Okay, I've given him 2 or 3 seconds to react. He hasn't reacted. Fine. Which means if I move the second unit up, he'll react to that and then run away. So actually, I don't want to do that. I finish moving. Oh, in which case I'll react.
Mm.
And then you're in this kind of weird space, and you're like, cool, okay. So we can go back to that. If you react to that unit, I will make another move.
Mm.
Oh well, I don't know then.
Yeah.
Like that. That's an area where you're
That
like,
gets tricky. Mm.
really, and that's on the reacting player there a little bit.
Mm.
It's an interesting area, and the best way around it is to talk about it
I think
and
I
to be
think you're
open
absolutely
and
right, and I
honest
think it's going to
with
be a really
all your
interesting growth
information.
area. It's going to be really interesting how this grows and people get to grips with that. Something we haven't dealt with really. Have we dealt with that in a Games Workshop game? Not really.
Um,
Not in such a reaction, the reactions type mechanic. I don't
yeah,
think
well,
we
Age
have.
of Sigmar has
Oh, that's
elements
true. That's true. Yes.
of this already. Um, yeah, I mean that's the main one. There have been other things. There are
It's
certain
not quite
rules
so
that
heavily baked into the rules like this, is there?
no, there are like specific individual rules around places like that might change things and stuff like that. Um, but also with reactions are the biggest aspect of that, I feel,
Mm.
because they're the nature of how they work and the nature of the potential gotchas that they can cause.
Mm.
But I think it's good practice anyway. I'm not necessarily sure that in Heresy it's something that we followed as much, actually, weirdly, as top. And what's weird is, particularly in the Warhammer / Age of Sigmar scene, usually the top tables have the better sporting behaviour. So Jack is a guy, a our club, who's won a lot of events, first person to get 400 points rankings in Warhammer, won multiple European team events, is now captain of the England team, has won multiple best sports for whilst winning events.
You almost feel like you have to, don't you? And yet the stereotype
But
is
not
wanting
all
to
of
be able
them
to win
do.
at all costs. No.
Yeah, not all of them do. But, and this is something that's been talked about on the 40k scene as well, particularly by some of the people right at the top, I don't want to win that way. I don't want to win because you made a stupid mistake. If you make a positional mistake or get something wrong with all the information laid out in front of you, then you haven't played the game as well as you could have. If you make a mistake because I don't tell you that I can do X, and I know it, and I know that you're unaware of it, then that's a bit more of a grey area. Like, again, where's the definitive line? There's not necessarily a definitive line, but to be able to say to someone like, okay, cool. When someone's moving up and go, I don't want to get charged next turn, and they say it to you, and this is why talking, like some of the best players will talk through their moves. Like I'm going to move this guy up so he's within charge range. Cool. Okay, cool. Right, yeah, brilliant. No, you can do that. I'm going to move this guy up and stay out of your charge range. Okay. Well, I can run in charge of Space Force. Did you remember that? Because this unit goes 11 inches, but I've actually got 4 inches behind that. I've got a jetpack unit, and they move 16 inches with the run, and they get +2 to their charge distance. So actually, you're going to have to be 28 inches away because that's what I can do on a big charge.
That gives a more positive game experience talking it through in that way, and the person moving with knowledge and confidence rather than, haven't I? And the other person's watching for it, and you go, haha, there you go, I've managed to catch them. Doing it that way it's never going to be as positive.
Don't forget, I've got 3 guys left in that Rhino still. They jump back in there last turn. I'm moving up so I can claim this objective. Well, don't forget, I've still got those 3 guys there. So actually, if you do want to do that, you probably need to kill them. Those kind of things. And I've also seen it work the other way. There was a guy in the Warhammer scene who was notorious for being a slow player. And what are you trying to do was always the question. I'm trying to do this. Brilliant. Okay. You can't do it. Actually, I've seen what you're trying to do. I've set my units up in a way that you can't do it. And that's because of here, here, and here. Cool. That decision's gone. That decision's gone. You've sped up that process because he doesn't have to work through every trying to get around it.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work. I have seen it still result in a.
But there's a higher chance of it working, isn't it? It's likely to lead to better experiences.
What you get is a purer game. A purer game, as you say, with less negative game experiences. You do learn more. You also get better because also, if you come up against a player, particularly who's better than you, and you're talking through everything, and they start saying, I see what you're trying to do. You've got to remember this, this, and this. That's something you might not have thought about. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's cool. That's quite intelligent. That kind of stuff. And, sometimes we'll do it when someone says dice down, we can squeeze this last turn in. Let's talk it through. Right? You'll do it at the end of the game when you want, this unit will move there and do that. But my unit will do this and that and that and that. If you've got one dude hiding behind a building and they can't, the opposition is like, I'm playing, all our tables are joined up in a big row, so I've got to walk down 5 tables, walk round back down 5 tables to see your side of the table, and I can't be bothered to do that. Okay, I'll move up here because you can't get that objective, and then you go, aha, in your turn, I had one little dude left behind this wall that you can't see who ran around there. Right. Yeah, I've seen it happen. I've probably done it back in the day, not maliciously.
It doesn't feel.
Doesn't feel good.
Types of games that these are, there are board games that are specifically designed to have those moments, to have the
absolutely.
aha reveal. Here it is, the sort of poker moment, if you like. I don't feel these games lend themselves brilliantly
even
to
at
that. They can be
competitive
played that way.
level, they should be a collaborative game. Even at competitive level, and you'll find as well when you do it, like if we as a community do that more, when you do it, the karma hits in, right, and it comes back, because sure enough, when you remind someone to do their charge, also it stops that kind of, you get to that weird point where you're like, do I ask for a comeback on that turn? Do I ask to say, hold on, I forgot to do that, can I go back and do it? And you get that weird little bit piece. But
you're like, I did this for you, so
yeah,
and then even that you're sort of keeping score, which is a bit grim.
Yeah, and then you get the whole. I mean, the whole kind of, oh, I was going to do that last turn, like, and always like, if I forget my psychic phase in old heresy or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to do that. Any chance I could do it? Yeah, no worries. I always fail it anyway because karma works that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, the danger comes. There are some points, and with certain players I know, where I will remind them, and then stop reminding them because that's how they learn. But that's people I know, and they know that they learn that way as well, and they kind of want that. But I think particularly if you're at an event or something like that, you're playing someone you don't know, and if you sat, I remember the first teaching one of our club guys to play 40k, and he went to charge a unit, and I went, oh, by the way, you do know that you'll be striking last because of this. And then I thought, I can also do this. He went, I would never have charged you if you're going to do that. I'm like, cool. Take them back. Where would you have moved them instead? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, if you weren't going to charge them, where would you? I would have moved them there. Cool, do it then. He goes, are you sure? Like, but I've moved them. And I'm like, but you moved them under misapprehension. Like, so let's, that's not a fair playing field. So
I think it's a perfect time, isn't it, with the release of a new edition to sort of reevaluate that. I think, particularly as we're all sort of having to we are having to relearn the game effectively. So it's quite a good time to be thinking in those terms about how we take
creating,
on this kind of game.
Oh, and I've said it on my what was I going to say? Said it in my player packs before. That part of your responsibility is to make sure both players are having fun. Within reason. Like, there are two players at the table, and you should be spending some effort to make sure there is an entertaining game going on. And that's the other thing. Event organisers. I think you're going to have to look at your packs quite a lot, and I think you're going to have to look at the way you're setting up your games quite a lot, and clarity in those, and clarity on what you want the event to be, how you expect people to play in that event, how even to the point of maybe explaining how you're organising the games. Maybe you don't. Maybe that's a purposeful thing where you don't tell people how the matchups are done, but maybe you do, particularly if you are having a more competitive event saying we're using Swiss. Well, you can have a narrative event say we are utilising Swiss, but not for any point scoring thing. I'm keeping a track of it. I just want to make sure that people of similar skill levels are playing each other as much as is possible within a system. I think that's a whole different thing as I start to think about events and running version 2 events or second edition events, what we do with that, because there's a lot going on there as well.
Oh yes.
Anyway, we will leave that there. We'll come back after the break.
It's a good topic. It's a good topic. It's a good one. I think a good
one
to revisit.
Yeah, I mean, get in touch with us with your thoughts on it. I think whether you think I'm way out of order or not, or what other approaches
play, or is there other ways, and particularly as we embark on new games and probably new people.
Definitely new people, but we'll come back and talk about that another point. But until then, we'll cut some music, and we'll be joined by Arbiter Ian. I'd like to welcome to the show Ian. How you doing, Ian?
Hi, Greg. Yeah, good. How are you?
Yeah, can't complain. Busy, but can't complain. So we first met. Would it be at one of my events? Was that the first time we met, or properly met anyway?
Yeah, I think probably. I was listening to your podcast for a while, and then I think I've come to one of the early Imperial Truth, like weekend long Firestorm Games Heresy events.
Taken Reaver, or I can't remember. I was looking this up the other day. I can't remember the names of what I did back in the day, back in Cardiff, with your militia, and all that jazz. So you're one of the older crowd for Heresy, really.
I'm kind of one of the. I've weirdly ended up in the position of being one of the older crowd generally in this hobby now.
Well, feels like it, doesn't it? I'm always thankful when I go to Age of Sigmar events, and there's the Treebeard Ancients, they call themselves, who have always been old. But I was only thinking the other day, actually, I was listening to another podcast, and they were talking about all the names in the Heresy tournament scene, or sorry, event scene in the UK, and I'm like, they're all second generation. Like all the guys I knew back in my first events, like a lot of those players are, they're still playing, but they're not necessarily going to events and stuff.
Events anymore, yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy. But I wanted to get you on because you have a hit YouTube show. I think we can say, and I'd subscribed a while ago, and I peeked in here and there, and then finally kind of sat down and watched some of the other stuff you did, and it hit a nerve, shall we say, in a good way. So I've been retweeting, and telling people to watch it, and had maybe unsurprisingly, bearing in mind, people who listen to this probably are into the sort of similar things that I'm into. A few people had already been attached to it, but before we get to that, I want to go back to the start of your hobby experience, because your YouTube channel leans on a lot of your knowledge, and I think it's pertinent. So when did you get into the GDub hobby?
Yeah, the GDub hobby, was it called that then? I got into toy soldiers, I suppose, which for me is, like many people, has mostly been Warhammer. Probably, I would guess it's about 1990. I was definitely too young to be into it, but I have a memory of being at primary school, which to any Americans would be around 9 or 10 years old, the end of primary school, and having a White Dwarf and some Citadel combat cards. A next door neighbour played 40k. It would have been Rogue Trader then, and got me into it. And then by the time I was probably, I guess, about 11 or 12, second edition came out, and I've sort of been playing Warhammer, 40k, Necromunda, all the other games, Heresy eventually, ever since then. Yeah.
This is definitely two 40-year-old white dudes having a chat, which is, a topic all of its own that we'll address later. But yeah, I got in just after. I'd been on the periphery, and all those things. Second ed for me, I actually started playing Warhammer first, but growing up through the 90s, when my Christmas presents were the boxed games, so it was Necromunda, Blood Bowl, Man o' War, all that stuff, because I could actually afford a team or an army or whatever.
We have a very similar experience to the 90s, I think, where whatever box set was the big thing that year was your Christmas present or birthday present, and that was when you got models.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's for people who weren't around, or lived in America or whatever. Certainly where I lived, there weren't any other shops. There was a Games Workshop in Eastbourne and Tunbridge Wells, and I lived halfway between the two. And there was this, there was one in Tunbridge, but we never went to Tunbridge. That was a bit further, and I didn't even know about it till years later. There weren't other places to get these games apart from Argos, and those games were Milton Bradley Games Workshop collaborations.
Hero Quest, Battle Masters, that sort of
Battle Masters. Were you on the part of the Hate Battle Masters paint?
I organised the Hate Battle Masters thing, and I'm still waiting for the last models to come back from it after 2 years. But it's on my over list this year. It's by the end of the year, I am going to complete that. Almost all, if anyone doesn't know, my game club, as a lockdown project, one of the things I tried to do in the game club was send out a stand of Battle Masters infantry to everybody who wanted in, and they would paint it and send it back to me so that I could build, and then I could make a new set of Battle Masters where I replaced all the labels with their own names. Which is still the plan. It's just a plan from 2 years ago now because I still haven't got all the models back.
I was watching a D&D Beyond YouTube video, and they've announced, or whatever, D&D anyway. They've announced they're bringing out Dragonlance.
Yes, they are.
And part of that is there's an actual miniatures game, a war game, associated
apparently
with
so.
it. And part of its design is designed by two of the people who have their name behind Battle Masters. And I'm like, much like everything else that's going on in nerddom at the moment, I'm like, what year is it? Like,
Dragonlance and Battle Masters.
Like, add that to the list of characters that are coming back in film and whatever.
Of 40-year-old white guy things.
Well, I think what this is, and again, this is a topic later on. To diverge already. Listening to people talk and kind of understanding things back in the boom of role playing and miniature gaming, well, those people are now writing TV shows and games.
Yeah.
Like this is partly why we've reached this point. Big Bang Theory helped, and Critical Roles helped, and all those other things. But actually, a lot of those creatives who were creative when they were young were playing Games Workshop and D&D and everything else, and all of a sudden they're now influencing what other people are consuming. So it's all an interesting cycle. It's very cool, but also slightly weird. Back then you got in, and that was, did you have much of a group to play with, or
just a group of school friends? Like there was definitely a couple of years in my teenage life which were every Saturday everyone would go around someone's house, and we would spend all Saturday getting like 2 turns into a way too big game.
Yeah. Standard.
Of like 40k second edition and then probably fantasy 5th edition.
Yeah.
When
you say way too big game of 40k, that involved like 50 models, 40 models.
A way too big game of 40k that was all the models you had, which was like a tank, a dreadnought, a blister pack chaplain, and 2 of the cheapest boxes of Space Marines.
Yeah, a cardboard thing here and there as well, and some and some. We didn't even have Pringles back then, did we? We had like a tube of something for terrain and all that. Yeah.
And then as usual, I dropped out for the mandatory end of teenage years 2 years when I became more interested in bands, and got back into it after I finished university as an adult with a disposable income, and so that was very different. And I've kind of been playing ever since.
Cool. Yeah, and is it the broad strokes of GW's systems and IPs that have kept you in, or is there been something specific?
Almost certainly the IP that keeps me playing it. I enjoy games, and I enjoy board games, and I enjoy the mechanics of them. But for me, tabletop war games are much more about the look and feel of it than the mechanics of it. If I want a like interesting, tight tactical game, there's a million board games for that do it a lot better than Warhammer. Warhammer's for when I want to set up a load of models and make a cool battlefield and do something cinematic. I'm one of those people who clears books and dice off of the table constantly, so that it looks cool. Yeah. And I don't play with unpainted models to force me to paint them so it looks cool. So it's very much my experience of Warhammer is less on the less of it as a game and more of it as an excuse to move some models around and do something that looks cool.
And outside of that, with regards to reading novels and devouring lore books and reading all those parts of all the rule books that come out, was that something you did as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely have more books than I ever used and more codexes than I ever actually played. And that sort of has fed into what I do on the internet now, which is talk about them.
Yeah, and just before we go there, it's like the period before you got in. So you're coming in the 90s. GW even then had changed. Like when we look at second edition 40k, like they started that the first wave of change that I was introduced to was all that. But in the 80s, GW was doing lots of different things. Were you going back in and looking at that at a much later date, or were you catching up as you kind of went?
A bit of both, because even when 40k started being very second edition-y, obviously the second edition you think of when you look back at 90s Games Workshop is really what evolved over the course of the 90s. For most of my first 5 years, I guess, in the hobby, Slaves to Darkness was still on sale.
Sure.
All that Rogue Trader stuff, those models were still, squats were available till most of the way through the 90s. They just didn't have rules. And so I think when we think of 90s Games Workshop, 90s Warhammer and 80s Warhammer as being different, actually the 90s Warhammer we're thinking of is like the Warhammer from 1997.
Yeah.
And actually, so yeah, a lot of that stuff, the White Dwarf articles, I used to buy old White Dwarfs from my local newsagent, which definitely had, stuff from the Rogue Trader era. Epic, games like Epic crossed over all that. So the first edition of Epic, second edition of Epic, which was all the same Rogue Trader art and fluff, kept being used all the way through second edition. So yeah, I was sort of reading the books and having that around and just being into the lore was something that was always the case, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. Sorry, I just weirdly, while we were talking, I just noticed 2 bits on 2 models that I thought were painted that are unpainted.
Oh, no.
Having a messy desk.
Noticeable bits?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
They'll have to be done. That's fine. It's just needs to be done. It's like, this is like, I'm a shambles when it comes to organisation. So this is why the mixer had to go off the desk, because I needed more room to put more rubbish that shouldn't be there. It's all good. Yeah, you're right. That mid 90s, and that would coincide roughly with when they were taken over, weren't they? When they when the ownership changed and all that jazz, all that behind the scenes stuff that affected, and they started to codify things, and like that kind of golden age that we thought we were living in. Bless, it was good fun for sure. But when you look back now, it's like, wow, I don't have to build a metal whatever, like planet killer.
I'm cursed by the fact that as soon as a new version of a model is released, I want the old one, which means that I'm still the person, searching for metal dreadnoughts and building them for fun.
Dreadnoughts I can understand. It's like some of those Screaming Skullcat in metal. No, thank you. You're all mad if you want that stuff. But that's cool. So that's it's a long time. Yeah, we've been in it a while, haven't we?
Yeah, 30 years in the game, isn't it?
Exactly, and over that time, lots of things have changed. If you said, particularly around that late 90s, they really started to kind of solidify what they had in terms of lore and adapt, and we still see that going on now, don't we?
Yeah, and I think that was very much when I started the channel. That was one of the big catalysts. Really, was listening to a lot of people talk about how basically it was at a time a couple of years ago when all of gamer world was getting very angry about literally anything ever changing as they perceived it. There was an awful lot of like, oh, Games Workshop are being more diverse. Games Workshop have said people won't be missed. Games Workshop are changing. All this, like this narrative being pushed, and just a bit of me went, hold on a minute. I remember Rogue Trader, and it's changed all the time. It's constantly been something that changes. So it was a bit of a catalyst to like making the channel was going, I'm not sure there's many people out there actually, stating that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And it's frustrating to hear other outlets putting across erroneous information. For whatever reason, it's erroneous, and a lot of time it's ignorance, and that's fair enough. You don't know what you don't know. But there was also some malicious aspects of that. Completely, we don't need to go into that. I'm sure we all understand. So there was a drive there to have to provide correct information. So when this is pandemic time.
Pandemic. So my job is I design live events, but specifically I make video, design video content and screen content and projections and things like that. So the idea of being like I was in pandemic with a load of cameras and editing equipment and nothing to do with them. And I thought, well, I might as well have a go at this YouTube thing. I can talk to a camera. I've done that before. And I had a go at writing some, I guess you'd call them lore. I guess lore is the word it would fit into, like background videos, but kind of background videos that went over some of the things in 40K with a bit of a not in world, a bit of an awareness of the company and the way it's changed and the way gaming's changed and the way the community's changed. Which wasn't really intentional, I suppose, but it turned out to be a bit of a niche because it turns out a lot of people who do talk about the background and the lore tend to do it in World, which tends to lead you down a path of trying to make it make sense.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think the channel, I wasn't really expecting much of it, and then the channel turned out to be quite popular. And I think one of the things people have said is because if something is not clear or has got contradictory information, I tend to just say it's unclear and has contradictory information rather than trying to build it into some narrative, which is apparently a different thing for in the world of 40k lore. Who knew?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I wonder if that's an element of your history within Games Workshop and the IP, of having an understanding of that, and maybe newer people coming along believing they have to believe, or whether that's kind of a mindset that
Yeah.
is more prevalent now, potentially to want to know facts and want to know what they're reading.
Yeah.
Is factual. I had a talk with an author, and they were talking about another author's book that is coming out, and he said, "Oh, Reddit's going to love it because he's going to give answers for this, and this, and this, and and his, that first author was like, I'm not sure if that's good or bad, like,
Yeah. But
that will certainly work for a certain audience who just want to know facts. We see it on Reddit particularly. Tell me what happens in this book. Like, I just want to know, like, who wins that, who does that.
Yeah, who would win in a fight? Who's the most powerful of that? Who would win in a fight between them?
What?
Yeah, and for me, part of the fun of it is that it's one of the reasons it's so popular, I think, is because it's got 50 writers writing for it, and it has had for 30 years, and they're all going to come up with different contradictory stuff, and no one's the good guy, and nothing's completely sure, and all of that is designed it's not designed to be a coherent novel series or a film series. It's designed to be a setting where you can set your own weird things. And that obviously then becomes pertinent if we talk about the heresy, because people's opinion as to where the heresy sits within things that definitely factually happened and a sandbox world where you can create your own things varies considerably, we might say.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a whole subject in and of itself. But you don't just do that, and we'll get into that. But you don't just do that. You do. How did it expand from that? So you have book clubs on there?
Yeah, so we do a few. So I do a few things now. Partly it's because obviously pandemic stopped and I got busy again with work, so I needed to find things that weren't, hour-long, week-long animation projects where I animate all the different sides of the Badab War moving across the galaxy. Which, lovely as it is, I have not yet managed to do something like that again since the pandemic ended. I needed to find new things, and I called on some lovely friends from gaming clubs and from before then, to make a few different things. So nowadays the channel is sort of a mix. I guess the core of it is still lore and a bit of commentary, I suppose, on the culture around 40k. And then we do some Let's Plays of games I haven't seen other people do Let's Plays of. So we dug out some of the really old Games Workshop games. We've done Let's Plays for Bombers over to Sulphur River, or the old Warmaster White Dwarf game, which was a token-based game where you could play the Assault on Horus's flagship. Let's Plays for that sort of thing. We do book club. So once a month, we set a 40k book, and then me and my friend Mira read it. Mira is relatively new to 40k. She's only read the books that I've set her as a task. So then we can go through it with a bit of an outsider's eye, which is nice. And I can explain what all the bits she missed mean, which is a good way of judging whether a book's accessible. We do book club. We do a Tale of Four Gamers. We've just finished our second one. So we did a Tale of Four Gamers over the course of about 8 months, building 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy armies and then playing them at an event. We just finished a mini one over 2 months doing Warhammer Underworld teams. So we do a few of those. And the third one's in the works. And I've also started doing the occasional little sort of, I guess, a bit like a reaction or a news video, but with a bit of only when Games Workshop release something that has a bit of history to it. So I can do a little bit of like, here's the new, definitely not squat models. This is why they are similar to the old ones and not similar to the old ones. These are the bits that are changes. These are the bits that have always been there. That sort of thing. So the channel now covers a few bases, but the core of it is still the background, I suppose.
Cool. Yeah. There's lots of stuff on there. You're right. It's all pretty good, and I think there's something in there for most people as well.
Yeah, there's some odd outliers as well. I've reviewed all the Bugman's beers, reviewed all the Warhammer candles. I went to the Harry the Hammer exhibit and interviewed Diane Ansell. I interviewed Diane Ansell about the old art she had on display up at War Games Foundry. I'm going to say that's correct, isn't it?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of there's all sorts of basically. I don't do this for a job, so it's whatever the hell I fancy doing.
Absolutely, and I think that's an important thing to remember for all content creators who aren't literally doing it for a job. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, then it becomes a job without any pay.
Yeah,
and there are times enough when you're enjoying it and it's too much. So let's not have any of that. That's what I say. So there's a definite kind of as you say, looking back on things. Recently you did the league. Was it the League of Volton? The squats.
Yeah, I'd already done a few videos about the squats, like the old squats. I've got a little squat army I've been painting up, and I did a few videos about alternate squat models. And so when they decided to release the League of Votan, I had a load of people going, "What do you think? What's the deal?"
Sure. Yeah.
So that's how I started ending up making reaction videos, I suppose.
And that's the problem as well, isn't it? Once things once you get people invested in what you're doing, they're then asking for more and more.
Yeah. Then I'm that guy who talks about squats online.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. What did you think of GW's article on the history of them?
I quite liked it, actually. I liked the fact there was a lot of rumors going around about how they're going to be controlled by men of iron, and I like that they dodged that bullet. I like that they've kept the men of iron in their back pocket as a baddie. And instead they've done something a bit more interesting, which is the idea that they've got old STCs, which they worship like ancestors, which might now, after thousands of years, be starting to develop a personality, which I think is a nicer way of doing it.
Yeah, I think they're the one thing about becoming more professional. I'm going to use some bunny ears around that because you can discuss that to your heart's content. Is there's these things are more thought through, and where they link in and what space they allow themselves and all that jazz moving forwards. They don't want to cut themselves off. There's a reason they haven't given you all the remaining Primarchs for 40k.
Exactly.
That space is important from a business point of view, but also from a storytelling point of view.
Yeah, all filled in the 2 Lost Legions.
Indeed, yeah. We already know probably a little bit too much because it just gets confusing. But even then, in that confusion, as you said earlier, you develop these, talk people. There's buzz around what they do. Do you find it hard with We'll go back to the lore. This chat's going to be all over the place, guys.
Yes.
You know me. So, do you find it hard? So what it is let me try and work out how to say this in a proper way. Everyone's got their own opinions. I watch your stuff and I'm not going to say I buy everything you say because that would be lying. Sometimes I sit there going, oh, I don't know. When you're putting your opinions across, how do you find dealing with those the stuff where there's a lot going on in that? If you understand what I mean,
before I answer,
there's a lot of different options. Go for it.
Are you talking about specifically lore things, or are we? Do you want me to mention things like the slightly more political videos I've done?
Well, I think the lore. The political videos. Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit as well. But the lore mainly because that enough sparks up around the lore. One person will scream Star God at you, and then someone else will scream no, that's dead in the water, and then someone else will scream something else. And
it's really interesting, isn't it? So it's a really interesting mix of responses. I find it really interesting nowadays, specifically where so many. I want to say newer, but of course I mean people have been playing 40k for 10 years, and I shouldn't use that word, but but relatively recent people who have come into the
Less
world of
venerable.
Sorry.
Less venerable.
Less venerable is good, isn't it? Yeah. Less venerable players who have maybe learned about 40k mostly through YouTube and the internet and Reddit. And I guess you get all the information then in a very bitty way. And you also get that horrible thing that happens now where the memes get mixed up with the real information. So people have quite weird ideas. They have headcanon. They've read one or two bits, as we said with the Lost Primarchs. Information is scattered over so many books now that people read one or two of them and decide that's what that is, or read something that is inferred or hinted towards, and then assume that must be true. And so sometimes I think sometimes I've done lore videos. I think most of my lore videos are pretty well researched. Like they're as I said, they usually come direct from the source material, and if something is contradictory, I say it's contradictory. But I do get people going, no, it's actually like this because in that one book they hinted towards this. Usually, the people who are saying that are. I get the impression there's a desire there for it all to be nailed down, and they prefer it all to be nailed down. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have. To be honest, I've not really got a lot of anger or a lot of ire. I have some videos that are a bit more political and have attracted and a bit more opinion based and have attracted a lot more anger. But that sort of stuff's quite easy to tune out. Again, especially when you don't do it for a living, right? It's not like I'm reliant on it.
Absolutely. Is there? So you do a lot of research. Do you write scripts for it?
Yeah. So
or are you more noted and role?
No, I've recently started doing the reaction videos from notes, and they're very much presented in a way where it is me chatting about things as I see them. But to be honest, no, the vast majority of the videos are scripted, researched as I go, and then I perform to an auto cue.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it works really well. So sometimes I'm not sure if you're off script, or I kind of guess there was a decent amount of research going in, but I also know there's a bit of knowledge going in there as well. The research helps refine that knowledge, I suppose.
Yeah, if I look like I'm off script and I'm being very casual, it's because I've already messed up the sentence 5 times and I know what it says now.
That's absolutely fair enough. The editing tools are one. You might not believe this show's edited, but I do edit it. Trust me, it would be a lot worse. Every now and then, a little piece of unedited has gone out. We try and stop that where we can. Have you had a topic yet where you've struggled to work out how to put it across, even within those contradictions, or to work out where you stand?
I've certainly got a couple that are like permanent work in progresses, where I find it hard to figure out where I start. Like a lot of the time with the lore and background stuff, I find it relatively simple to write if you're quite disciplined about going through things chronologically. So explaining, how there's a video I do, which is I did quite a long time ago now, which is how the perception of the Horus Heresy changed over time. Like what was the Horus Heresy in Realms of Chaos in 1988, and then when did it become something with Primarchs in it, and then when did it? And you can write those relatively easily if you're patient and you edit yourself and you make sure that what you're saying is concise and densely packed with information and delivered in a way that is in full sentences, despite the way I'm talking right now, and makes sense. So those are quite easy. The more difficult ones are the ones about the more amorphous subjects. So I've permanently had on my OneNote a half-formed script about balance, the concept of balance in a game like 40k, and the idea that game could be a truly competitive one or a tabletop sport or something like that, and why 40k doesn't really function like that. But those subjects tend to be so big that it's quite hard to know where to start. And I'm sure whenever I make that video, it'll be like an hour-long documentary. Because the video ends up with so much to cover and so many important points that it's very difficult to prioritize.
Well, this is something, and I suppose this comes down to writing the scripts. Have you got experience writing scripts?
I don't
Or
have.
is that something new?
No, writing's new to me.
Sure.
I have a fair amount of experience talking and giving lectures,
Right. Okay.
which is a similar thing. And so
Transferable.
I tend to write. I try and write like I think. Right, and I tend to write like I were explaining something technical to someone new.
Yeah.
Which is something I have to do a lot in my job.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I approach it. But I didn't really have, other than working in theatre for a lot of my life, I didn't really have a job. I've never really had a job that required me to be a good writer.
Sure.
So that prioritization and figuring out, laying out your points and trying to make it make sense on paper is something that's been an interesting thing to learn over the last year.
Yeah, because maybe back. I mean, over time, I've tried to listen to various YouTube channels. Some of the big ones that people always recommend. Some of the less controversial ones that some people recommend as well. And I've always struggled with inconsistency. Not necessarily inconsistency. There can be inconsistency, lack of context, misunderstandings, and thought to myself, actually, someone needs to come out and do something here, but they don't need to be an hour long, and I can't do it. I can't be concise. But you manage that really well.
That is something that I did. Again, I sort of didn't think about, and then realized after doing it that was a thing that didn't exist, which is that the other big thing about background videos is they tend to be an hour long, and they tend to be a voiceover, a slideshow, because they're aimed at people who are probably painting, and they want something they only have to change once every hour or two.
I'm not even sure they're aimed that way.
Right.
I think they're just people like me who, well, if I have to do this, I have to do this, and it will be an hour minimum. How can I distort this down, into whatever?
Yeah. So I've ended up in this world now where apparently one of the most popular things I do is here's the Badab War in 20 minutes. Here's how the heresy has changed from 1987 to now in 20 minutes. The most recent one I did, I think, was all the heresy factions in 15. And I'm going to try and go for a 40k video, that's also on the plan, is like a 40k video that does all the factions, but like less than a minute per faction.
Sure.
See how much I can pack in.
I think maybe that's just a mindset you've got where you don't always have to go deep.
It's an interesting
skill, because it's hard for me to go, well, there's this, and I'm like, but you have to know this, and to be able to stop at that point, actually, that's enough for now.
Yeah, you don't need to know any more than that. It's been interesting having people like Mira on the channel, because it's good having a sounding board of someone. I mean, Mira's an incredibly experienced tabletop games, I guess, journalist and writer and broadcaster, I suppose. She writes for Weird Science and edits 28 Mag and writes for Dragon Magazine and I think D&D Beyond, but is new to Warhammer. So, and one of the things that you constantly have to think about when you're writing that sort of content is how much your videos will be found by people who are completely new to the setting. Someone went on YouTube and Googled Warhammer or the Horus Heresy. And so trying to write in enough detail to be concise, but without going into so much detail that it becomes an hour of, to be honest, minor things you don't really need to know.
Yeah.
And it's still accessible to someone who's new. There's definitely it's something you have to learn while you're doing it, I suppose, and it's something I've had to learn.
Cool. It's I can do it. After Eleanor, it was a very long show where we did the book even when we tried to talk about knocking it down a bit. I was like, really? But
it's a different sort of thing, and it works really well. I mean, I've always really enjoyed listening to Imperial Truth and After Eleanor when that was out, and other podcasts like Age of Darkness and people like that. But it's just a different with that sort of thing. You assume that the person listening is not a newcomer to heresy, therefore you can do the deep dive.
Absolutely. But there needs to be those entry level shows that bridge that gap as well. And when it comes to someone coming up to me, Greg, I'm just getting interested in heresy, I want to look up this, and I'm like, I can't send you to Lutin or whoever, just a name, because they're too long, they're too in depth, and
Well, Greg,
I completely disagree with what they say on this point.
yeah,
That kind of thing. The one that gets me all the time when I see people talk about it is The First Heretic as a book. You've read it, I
yes,
assume. You're up to date with it.
yeah, I
With
am,
it.
yeah,
The amount of stuff that gets quoted as fact that
yes,
comes from that book, whether it's the Ultramarines, took in all the Second Legion or
yes,
whoever it was, right? They're like, it's written in there, and I'm like, no, it's said by a Space Marine in there as a theory, and then someone else basically says you're a conspiracy theorist. So it might be true, but it might not.
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Argyle Tull flicks the switch.
Yes, that's the one I immediately thought of. Yeah,
a demon is telling you this. A demon is showing you this, and there's about 5 or 6 different things through that book. You could go to the Space Wolves are the most dangerous legion, because when they asked, who are the most dangerous legion, one legionary goes, it's definitely the Space Wolves. But that's just one dude. It's that book spread so much information that isn't necessarily true.
It's one of the ones that came up a few times on videos I'd done where I'd said, I'm summarizing everything in 40k, for example, and saying something like, and the Emperor made the Primarchs, and they were scattered by the powers of chaos to different planets. Great, that's all you need to know. The point is, they're all on different planets, and you have to go and find them now. And the amount of comments that are like, well, actually, and again, I assume everyone's up to speed. Actually, if you read Saturnine, it's in fact the case that Erda actually was the one who did that. And you're like, okay, Erda says she did that. How did she do that?
Yeah.
The warp wasn't involved? Like, I'm pretty sure we're going to find out that everything's true, and that it was sort of Erda, but sort of chaos, but sort of a warp portal, but sort of, and there'll be some clever way in which they're all wrapped together, and everything was always true all along.
Even if you believe one, from the very first time I read The First Heretic, I was like, you're being told this by a demon.
Yeah.
And then I was like one of the only people I knew who were like, didn't believe it as fact. I'm like, hold on, dude. If a demon came to you and just told you everything, you'd believe it. This is worrying. You group of people. And so even if you come up with your own, it's all very well to have what you believe in, and that's fine. It's not portraying that as canon. I believe Erda because she's in this position. Does she have a reason to lie? Whatever. Therefore, I believe it's more likely to be that situation than this situation.
Yeah.
But there's still that 10-20% space
possibility. Or even, I think for me, who I believe doesn't really come into it. Like I always find it quite weird in Warhammer. I don't find it weird because people do it all the time, but it's not something I identify with, is the idea of picking a faction, going, I'm a Space Wolves player, or I'm an Eldar player. And I'm like, well, in the same way, I don't feel like I need to believe Argyle Tal or believe Erda or have an opinion that's anything other than, well, I've read all the books and there's 3 or 4 different theories. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't need to pick one or back one or have my own personal way of stitching it all together. I'm just interested to see what happens next.
And that's cool. Yeah. And I suppose that, there are, a myriad of different personality types and the way they look at things and everything else that all meld into that as well. My problem is when we're portraying that information. I have a podcast. I feel there's a responsibility on me as a podcaster.
Yes.
And even though I'm doing this as a hobby, and who am I really? Does it really matter? No. But I feel there's a responsibility on me to get things right within whatever value of get things right is. When you're talking about stuff that has no right or wrong, but to be honest and to try and be factually, not make mistakes, not put across false information. So what really gets me is when other people are factually wrong. It's all very well doing that kind of stuff, which grinds my gears a little bit, but when it's factually wrong stuff, then I'm like, hold on. New people, as you said earlier, people are coming into our hobby sphere, whether that's 40k as a whole, whether that's just into heresy from 40k, and then they've seen that line repeated so many times that it's become fact, and then they get angry when the fact is not what they know.
Yes, and we've seen that a lot recently with the release of Heresy 2 and things in the background that I'm 90% sure aren't really changes, but are like, I would put them forward, things like armor marks, I would put forward as reframing to favour one of the many theories that was maybe not the theory that was favoured 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that, which is hard to. I think that's hard to get to grips with when you're not used to it.
Yeah, if you're coming from IPs that police themselves very well and have established timelines and divergences, and they're all written down as to when that happened and what person's in what world and what is true and what's canon and what's not. It can be hard to then come into 40k where everything's like, meh, maybe, no one knows. It's 10,000 years of history.
What's interesting is when people coming from comic books, and you're like, but it's all true. Like everything, comic books reset all the time, so everything is true and not true at the same time. But yeah, your Lord of the Rings has a laid out series of events that can be followed, and the 40k is definitely not as codified as Lord of the Rings is. There's no doubt about that. Should we? Okay, yeah, armor marks. Whoa.
Armor marks is one of my favourite. That's a big point of departure for me in Heresy World, because my opinion on armor marks is the early black books tell you that the Forge Worlds make all sorts of weird stuff. Therefore, use whatever you like.
Yeah, pretty much crack on.
And people hate that for some reason.
They do. And what frustrates me a little bit, and it's lack of knowledge that isn't necessarily I blame people for, but everything that's good about the early books, black books, the original Heresy books, gets put down to Alan Bly's genius, and then everything in the later books gets put down to the fact that there's rubbish put down to the fact that Alan Bly isn't there.
Yeah.
But there's Neil Wiley's worked. He play tested book 1 and he's worked on every book as a writer since book 2. Like, the guy knows his Heresy. He's the head writer there now for Heresy, and other people have been around as well. Andy Hall is now heading it up. Andy Hall was there on book 1. John French was there on book 1. These are the same people now who are doing, who are talking about Mark 6 as it is now. And cool. Just does it really matter as well? Because with people coming in, like, they almost don't care. But as you're right, there's always been that room. Like, my favourite thing is, I'm going to make a Heresy army. Brilliant. How many Marines have you got in it? 70. Yeah. Cool. They're all wearing Mark 5. Oh, well, this Legion, there's 70 dudes. Start of the Heresy, this Legion had 130,000 people in it. My 70 dudes aren't even going to stand out. And little things they've started. I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but the latest, the Sigismund book by John French, there's a point in there where Sigismund meets other captains, and there's he's talking about the myriad of different colours.
Yeah,
where, people having half face plates, one's blue, they're all fists.
Yeah.
They've all got campaign colours. They've all got different stuff going on. It's a pretty huge universe.
That's one of the things I really enjoy about it, is that I love the little tidbits where you see bits where the 120th company of the Ultramarines have this weird, slightly different blue armor that you then realize, as they're describing it, is a second founding chapter, and that's what they're going to go on to be. And I like that sort of one of the things I'd love to do, which is on my list of videos to make about the Heresy, is a sort of 5 cool ideas for personalizing your army. Because so many people come into it thinking, or newcomers to it will go, well, it's just Marines, just these 18 Marines. I don't want to paint. I want to do my own thing. And
don't realize painted these 18 colours.
Yeah, don't realize that. Yeah, great. You can get your white scars and paint them in a night planet camo scheme with red slashes on the black armor and just a white shoulder pad, and call them the Brotherhood of the something that's going to turn into a second founding chapter with a different. That's all absolutely fine. And dress them in, if you want, your own kit-bashed mark of armor with bits from other manufacturers doing all sorts of, all that's absolutely fine, and it always has been. And I quite like that.
Especially when you break, once the Heresy started, and I can understand there's a bit more reticence maybe from loyalist factions, people who want to be loyalists, to stick to what they know. But anyone, as soon as they break from the Imperium, surely all bets are off anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think
do what they want.
There's the whole. There's this weird. I I'm not complaining about it, complaining about communities and things like that, but there is this weird dissonance between the idea that this is going to be this is more like a historical game. We need to do things in the way that we know they were, and then the sort of jettisoning of any real life experience of a giant civil war. Like the idea that, I don't know, Mark 6 was only available for testing, therefore your army can't all be Mark 6, or Mark 7 wasn't invented completely yet, so your army can't be Mark 7. When we're in a galaxy where a small amount of test suits of armor might be 10,000.
Yeah.
They're not bothering sending a ship for anything less than that. The idea that after 6 years of civil war, the idea that an army of Ultramarines are all wearing the same armor mark, that their gloves match their shoulder pads, is madness. It doesn't exist in any war.
No.
So, yeah, for me, it's all this. One of the things I like about it is how, despite being a bit of a historical setting, the heresy is still very, very fluid with lots and lots of space for your guys,
Yeah, you only have to look at like the start of World War One to the end of World War One, like completely. I mean, the French cavalry rode with wearing soft caps and stuff, right? At the start of World War One, and by however long through it, all of a sudden we've got planes in the sky, and just like, and that's what we can do. That was 100 years ago here. Like, when you look forward to the resources and the science, magic-y, whatever you can do in a future universe, like there are huge gaps for it. There's that weird, and it's really, I think it's really hard to describe how there is an element of, Hello Kitty Marines are probably not going to be welcome at an event, right? There's a line somewhere, but no one has ever told me a decent kind of explanation of where that line is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you weren't allowed white and blue quartered Ultramarines until Pharos was written, and then all of a sudden you're allowed white and blue quartered Ultramarines because they're in the heresy. It's like, well, they weren't this day. So yeah, and I have this quite contrarian side to me that wants to kind of reach out and kind of go, here's my bronze Iron Warriors.
Yeah, me too.
But I think it's also important, and I suppose, I mean, I don't know if you've looked at the leaks for Second Ed version 2.
Yeah, a little bit, not all of them, but yeah, a little bit.
I've avoided a little bit, most of it, but having heard about warlord traits for loyalist, independent, and traitor, I've seen people talking more about doing counter forces, so loyalist traitors or traitor loyalists. I've seen more of that in the last however many weeks than I had before.
That's interesting. And is that, do you think, because is that in the existing community, or is that amongst newcomers? Because I get the
existing community.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I almost think there's an element, and people come to the games for different reasons, and I think some people just need to be allowed to do it for whatever reason. That's fine. That's fair enough. And if GW have done that and it's allowed people to open up their mind to more other things, then cool, I'm grand. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a long way off where we were talking anyway. Yeah, absolutely. So, partly why I got you on was because you are going into the heresy.
Yeah, back into the heresy.
Well, yeah, back in, should I say? But it seems to be you're starting a heresy project on the channel.
Yeah, well, I've started a couple of heresy projects on my channel now. So there's two big things we're doing. The first thing I'm doing is trying to do, as I realised that, as you said, like a lot of the heresy content out there is very aimed at or existing players. I started to do a series going through each legion, going through each army, and just surmising the background behind them. The thing that I find most interesting about all the legions, which is how their culture, not only just how their culture evolved, but also how the writers retroactively invented one that fit the culture they had to have in 40k. Which I find really, really interesting, the heresy. It doesn't touch that much on the Primarchs because I find them the most boring bit about the heresy. The least interesting bit to me is the superhero bit. So I've started doing that, so that's going to be running on for the next few months. I'm just putting the finishing touches to the White Scars episode, and I just, at the time of recording, released my extreme comprehensive lore video on the famous Second Legion for anyone who wants to play them.
I quite enjoyed that. I wondered where you were going to go with that. Fair play to you.
And then what we're doing next, as I said, we do these Tale of Four Gamers, and the plan is to do, well, basically spend the rest of the year doing Tale of Four Gamers for Heresy armies. So the four of us, myself and my friends Bobby, Gary, and Russ, are going to be every month charting our progress as we build our four Heresy armies. We've all got way too big plans, and we're all probably going to try and get hold of the sort of release box, which is already too big to do convincingly as a Tale of Four Gamers. So I think we'll probably do something like give ourselves, like, I don't know what the new points values will be, but give ourselves a relatively sensible Heresy amount, like maybe 2,000 points to complete.
Sure.
And do it over the course of the rest of the year. And I think we might, a few people have requested on the Tale of Four Gamers that we do like a get some people to paint along, use it as an excuse to get people to help people get their army done, maybe feature. So we'll be encouraging people to send photos in of progress every month, feature them on the channel, and then arrange some sort of event at the end of it, probably early next year, where we can go and play these armies. So that's the plan at the moment. Those are the two big Heresy things going on the channel. But mostly I've resigned the rest of my year to painting Heresy soldiers. In fact, one of the nice things is it's given me a bit of boost now in the next month to get a load of other projects done.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've got time.
The other three on there, so it's Bobby,
Gary, and Russ. Yeah, Bobby.
Right. What's their history with Heresy?
Oh, interesting. So I think Bobby has played Heresy before. I think she might have played that before. She's also just started a YouTube channel doing reviews of the models on Sprue, which is something I'm amazed didn't exist already, but it's a really nice little look into some of the kits. And she does Fafnir, Ran, and Zephon in early episodes there, just looking at the sprues and what the parts are and what they can be used for.
Oh, the first time I looked at that Zephon sprue and that shoulder pad was in two pieces. Oh my word. Anyway, yeah.
So yeah, Bobby I think has played before, and her knowledge about the Heresy is very good. Right. Russ, I think, is into the lore, but I don't think he ever played Horus Heresy the first time round.
Sure.
And Gary has not played Heresy and hasn't played 40k for years. So for him, this is a way of, because of edition, I guess you could call it edition slip, like because of them being out of sync now. For him, I think this is a way of him getting back into 40k with something he vaguely remembers.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see how much like the old systems it was, or it is going forward. So that's cool. So you've got a nice mix there.
Yeah, and I think we've all got a similar opinion on it. That we were all. I think it's something, apart from maybe Gary, it's something we all wanted to do a few years ago. I mean, as you know, I played for most of the first edition of Heresy up until the release of 8th edition 40k. I played Heresy, and when it was originally, when the Black Library books came out and the Black books came out in 2006 and 2012, I was really into it. It was great. I remember when the Black Library books came out, and guys like, what was it, Tempest Fugitives were doing their own Heresy rules, scrabbling together the bits of the Tactical Squad kit that could be used to make the models. And so I was always saying I wanted to be into. And then when first edition Heresy came out, the big catalyst for me was I had all the Black books, but the big catalyst for me was when the militia list was released. Because I was in the middle of building a massive 40k Renegades and Heretics army at the time. And so I played militia, as you know, at a lot of your events with a little success, but it always felt very thematic all the way through Heresy. And like a lot of people, part of the reason I was playing it was because, if you remember back then, Heresy was the easier way to play 7th edition 40k, because 40k at the time, much like now, was a bit of a shambles.
Yeah, it was a lot going on, shall we say, and some might argue that there's a lot going on in 40k at the moment as well.
I think that's why it's a very interesting time for Heresy to come out again, because I was definitely one of the people who, when 8th edition dropped, I massively preferred it. It was like an absolute weight off my shoulders compared to 7th edition 40k. And, you know, as someone who was playing, a lot of my attraction to Heresy, as well as the lore, was the fact that it was just less work than 40k. When 8th edition dropped, obviously that was even less work than Heresy. So I was an enthusiastic 40k player for that. But of course, the same thing happened, which is that it's taken a very competitive turn. It's got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it's kind of like the situation we were in 7th. And it will be interesting now, I think, to see if Heresy repeats this. It basically has the same draw selling points that it had back in 7th edition 40k, which is that you get to play 40k and you get to play a game that feels like 40k, but it's a hell of a lot simpler than 9th edition 40k is right now.
Yeah, there are other factors in that. I think the tournament scene in 40k now can be quite divisive, in the way that it influences other games as well. So I know at the club we've got, for the first time in a while, a plastic set coming out, and the promise of more plastic stuff coming also helps hugely.
Yes,
so we've got a handful of people who are like, I'm interested in Heresy moving forwards, and it's like, cool, well, just hold your horses, like, don't go and buy a 7th edition rulebook, like, let's just, it will come. It's only going to be a matter of weeks now, even if it's the summer release. It's only weeks away, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
And we'll find out more on the 7th for sure.
But something I'm very much looking forward to. Very much looking forward to getting back into it. I'm interested to see what the new rules are. I'm slightly daunted by the having to remember how 7th edition 40k works, but we'll see if it's how different it is.
I'm sure it's all come flooding back to you straight away. Yeah, and a lot does. I think who knows, like, how many changes. I know the leaked documents out there. It's quite interesting that people are playing games with these.
Oh, they're attempting to do that. That's interesting.
They are, but they don't have all the information. And a simple wording change can actually change the way a number of rules work and stuff like that. So, like, if you're hearing reports and stuff, I'd just be a little bit, just give it time. Wait until the actual release before we knows what's going on. Obviously, on the 7th, people are going to be able to play the game. I don't know in what format they're going to be. Those who are lucky enough to get tickets to the open day.
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure how that's going to work, whether that's going to be a stripped down version or what have you, because trying to teach people who've never played 7th edition how to play it.
Yes, it's such an interesting idea now, isn't it? It's 5 years ago last time anyone actually played 7th edition.
Yeah, it'd be like the old, when I was a staffer, it's just move here, just roll this, you need this, like all that kind of thing. But that's cool. So we've got a good load of Heresy content to come from you.
Yes.
As well as around your other little bits you're doing, I suppose, whatever takes your fancy.
Yes, but I think the next few months are going to be pretty heavily Heresy focused.
There's only so much time in the day, isn't there?
Yeah.
And these things do take time. But I really look forward to doing that. As I said, I've watched most of your videos now, and all those kind of lore tidbits. As I say, I haven't found anyone who does as concise or as well thought through, as we said. Like, people, a lot of those lore stuff are people reading a Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I showed off Andy Hoare's reply to someone about the Palatine Aquila recently.
Oh, yes.
Which to be honest, if you'd asked me to describe what a Palatine Aquila actually looks like, I'd have struggled, because there are a number of Aquilas that mean different things.
And I don't believe anywhere, this is something else that came up recently with the new Spartan release. I don't believe anywhere in any book does it actually define what is and is not definitely a Palatine Aquila.
Exactly. But people, again,
very convinced they know.
Are very convinced they know. And someone actually replied to the tweet with a Google image of Palatine Aquila and a number of images. And I'm like, but that's just a Google search based on the word Palatine Aquila, which we know people have been getting wrong. So it has no relevance to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But they were sure. Fair enough. Cool. Crack on. But when the guy who's been with heresy from book one has worked alongside Alan Bligh for a long time, and now heads up the department that oversees all this, when he tells you that it's this, even if it wasn't that back in the day, it's definitely this now.
Yeah.
So, all those little things, like I could have asked a number of experts on the heresy and they wouldn't have got that right.
Yeah.
So there's lots of information, lots of, reading off Wikipedia is, the amount of times I've seen articles and gone, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Actually wrong. And you don't do that. And as you say, you allow nuance in, which is probably the biggest thing, and something maybe I sometimes, in my excitement and my own theories, then get put across. And that's going to happen every now and then. You can't help that. To try and remember that we do try and always put across the fact
a nuanced view.
Things a little bit different. Yeah, I mean the classic one is like when people say, "Oh, they're not going to change the final battle, Horus versus the Emperor, are they?" I'm like, "Well, which final battle?
Yeah.
Which version are you talking about? Are you talking about the original? Are you talking about the guardsman, the Terminator, or the custodian?"
Yeah, and was it in his bunker or on his battle barge? Because that was a thing once.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it against Horus, the famous general who commanded 5 chapters of Space Marines?
Exactly.
Or Horus, it's just like, of course they are. Whoever writes that story is obliged to put something in that we don't know is going to happen.
Yeah, also, it's going to contradict at least one of the stories that's come out. So whatever you're coming from, you can say, well, they've retconned that. And retcon is a word that gets thrown around so often.
Yeah.
If we look back at spoilers, if we look back at Saturnine, when Ol has his whole kind of meeting with the Emperor, with the flag and everything else, everyone's like, that's a retcon. It's like, well,
they never really fleshed it out to start with, did they?
No, it's an explanation of how a story came about, which is only a retcon if they definitely told you that was exactly what happened. Whereas, as you said, 40k particularly has been written for a long time now. As people think the unreliable narrator is a lazy thing. That's an excuse, and that can come out and sometimes maybe a bit fair.
Yeah.
But actually, we're talking about myths and legends, and we always have been. It's space fantasy.
And that nuance is part of the reason I find it interesting. I think it's part of the reason that it's so strong, and having it all battened down and solid, and a definite canon that absolutely happened and cannot be changed, and it would be an outrage to change it. In fact, that would disadvantage the setting,
and it would unmythologize the heresy, which is supposed to be a mythology.
Yeah,
and there are fair arguments from people, I think, that have said we've found out too much. I can understand that. My draw the line in the sand is, people next they need to do unification wars, and I'm like, I really don't think they do. The odd story within the unification wars, fine, but don't go back beyond Great Crusade. Even I'm like, no, just the odd story is all right, but I don't want to know the ins and outs of the Great Crusade. Plus, I don't think they will, because then you have to talk about the 2nd and 11th Legion a lot more. But tease us, keep teasing us.
Yeah, agreed. That's what I want from this.
Yeah, absolutely, excellent. So, we never actually named your channel. In all that.
We're a podcast, so we have to actually say it, don't we?
We do, yeah, we do. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Arbitor Ian. If you Google that, you'll find me. That's been my name on various things for years and years, so it made sense to use it as a YouTube channel. But primarily, I am a YouTube channel. I have a Twitter and an Instagram that are infrequently updated. But if you go to YouTube, go to search for Arbitor Ian. That's Arbitor, like the rank of evil space police. You'll find me there.
Yeah, I'll put links in the show notes to Twitter and everything else as well. And we'll say that your political leanings don't, as you say, you've met some, you've confronted, you've confronted some of the more extreme.
I'm in the privileged position of being able to confront some of the more extreme opinions within sections, very, very small and vocal sections of the community,
You're called
without
out
it
a fascist
impacting my
as
livelihood,
a
which is
Yeah.
so that's sometimes what I do.
Yeah, and I think if we sat down and had a chat, I'm sure we'd have our differences, but when it comes to certain people and certain topics, screw them. Frankly, you are all welcome as long as you're making other people feel welcome, as far as I'm concerned. And so, fair warning for people. There's little bits of that, just because some people, whatever, just so they're not shocked.
Just so they're not shocked when they see the 2-parter on female Space Marines.
And crack on. Like, let people have that. Again, this is a big galaxy with lots of stuff involved, as far as I'm concerned. And we want new blood. Like this one thing I went to, if you've ever been to a heresy weekend, I was talking to someone who's very new to the hobby, within a year actually. We were actually in a Games Workshop store in Brighton, and there were 3 females and 3 males in the whole store. And they were like, wow, I've never seen this before. And I'm like, yeah, like, go to Heresy Weekender. Like, there aren't many women there. And that.
And it'll be interesting to see with its put. I'll be really interested to see if that changes in Heresy, given the current push. Because one of the interesting things about playing Underworlds was that it's much more balanced, gender balanced. Because it's feels a lot more like a board game. It's such a good entry point into the hobby, and it's also not weighed down by an awful lot of baggage of. Even the sort of way I like to play 40k in Heresy has got an awful lot of sportsmanship baggage, what you do and don't do, that is mystifying to a new player. Underworlds is a really tight, really concise game that you can learn and get a taste of painting, and so it's bringing loads of new people in, and that means that it's a lot more diverse. And it was really nice to go to Warhammer World and see, huge, just a sea change compared to 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And
lovely.
We know that if you follow people on Twitter or whatever, and you see kind of those positive, like, promote yourself female tweets, there's so many women out there doing the hobby. And it's not just women, it's it's all those, like, as we say, all those non 40-year-old white males that we hang around with, like our friendship group, that are at events that we need to be providing a space, and I don't think we necessarily have been providing a welcoming space to
I think that's
to even non-heresy players, to a point. And sometimes that's just their perception, but that's all that matters, is perception.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's always been a thing. Again, I think it'll be really interesting to see how, especially given there's so many, the idea of 40k is in such a specific place at the moment. It'll be so interesting to see how that heresy community broadens now. There's always been within heresy, and it's always been a minority, and it's always been a small proportion of overall heresy players. But even when plastic kits came out and a load of people who spent a load of money on resin started being grumpy about anyone who wasn't using real models, again, that's like almost a myth for how rare that actually was.
Yeah.
But it looks bad.
Exactly.
And the same with rivet counting or exact correct model, whatever you call that. I think almost the fact that heresy has been out of the limelight for a few years means that it might get quite a better reception now.
Yeah, it was sort of a fresh slate kind of thing. And I don't, I don't want to go on and bang on, and we're already way off topic again. But and I won't bang on about like what's gone on and whatever. But what we should be doing is looking at ways, just looking at our events, our output, what have you, and just considering, is this welcoming for a new player?
Yes,
or are we turning them away? And that's where I think we need to be now. Certainly, me looking at the podcast, even me just listening to podcasts is great. Like, you have a deep podcast where you know the people on it and know their friendship group, and that's fine. But if they're all like that, then how do people get in? How do people feel part of that, and not that it's a closed shop? And it's tricky to do because you want to have fun with your friends, don't you?
Yeah. So, and It's lovely. As I said, like I brought it up a few times, but the recent Tale of Four Gamers thing we did, the community team organised a little event around it. We played Good Friday with 20 players. Some of those people, it was their first ever gaming event, playing four games of Underworlds at Warhammer World, and they'd never been to a gaming event before. Some of them hadn't played anyone other than, say, their partner at the game, and so there's a load of big obstacles there if you've never done this to overcome it. Playing new people in a I mean, we very much made sure it wasn't a competitive setting, and that's such a big thing Heresy is able to bring, is that sense of fun, non-competitive, friendly setting that hasn't got the pressure of a competitive 40k tournament. That's such an advantage Heresy has that I'm hopeful that is for many people a breath of fresh air.
Well, I think you've got the four of you on the channel, all of you have got to kind of accept that some of that was down to the way you promoted what you were doing and your channel. So, big up to you guys for providing that environment that people felt they could come along.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, partly it's because that's the sort of games we want to play, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not always easy to get that across and everything else as well. It can be tricky. Anyway, we've chatted a while. So, go and check out the YouTube channel. Loads more cool Heresy content which is going to be great. It's going to be an exciting year.
It's going to be a busy year, Greg, because I've had a bag full of Scimitar jet bikes in the bottom of my storage for 5 or 6 years now, and they're all going to get painted by Christmas.
Oh, yeah. I've just got so much stuff that needs to get done, but for many different game systems as well. But yeah, it'll be the kick, I'm sure. Anyway, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you, Greg. Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth podcast. As you can tell, that piece with Ian was recorded a while ago, and then stuff happened, got busy, plenty on the show, pulled it back to this episode. So we did eventually get it out. Therefore, they've already started their Tale of Four Gamers, where he as well through his Space Marine series. There's lots of cool stuff to go and check out. Arbitor Ian on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. I did get that game in that we talked about with Howard. We'll talk about that next show. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm trying to keep up at the moment, so thank you for bearing with me. We're going to keep this short because of that, but so much cool stuff going on in Heresy at the moment. So much hobby going on, events being organised, people playing games. Absolutely loving it. Get in touch with us about any of that you wish, any ideas, any questions. Once again, like new listeners listening to this, welcome. If you've got any, it can be quite hard to look back as an experienced gamer, particularly with, even just within a system. The issues maybe of getting into a new system. So if you have questions or tips or things like that you want us to talk about, them, please get in touch, Greg at theimperialtruth.com, and you can find me at you can find the show imperial_truth on Twitter as well, and at Child of Fang on Instagram. I'm at Child of Fang on Twitter as well. So use either the Facebook group, you can reply to this thread that we put up there, or you can send a message on one of those formats. It's all good, and it all helps us provide content that you want to hear at the end of the day. And we've had a number of new listeners coming, or maybe old listeners coming back, who knows, that listening to the last couple of episodes. We're still riding that wave. It is exciting times, and I have got Heresy models sat in front of me. I'm actually doing a little bit of building, slow as that may be, while I've got a little bit of time. Again, thank you for bearing with me on the episode, because trying to get these out on time is struggling at the moment. I'm literally going to try and get this up and then start editing my other podcast. So yeah, it's just we're getting on top of things, but it's all good. If you like what we do and you want to support us, you can tell your friends to come and listen. That is absolutely amazing. You can review us on wherever you listen, whether that's Amazon Music, Spotify, Podcatcher, iPlayer, whatever it is, Apple Music. However you listen to us. And if you like what we do even more, and you would consider using our links for Element Games if you're over this side of the pond. Unfortunately, you can't do that if you're over the water too far. And then if you really, really like what we do, we have a Patreon, and you can support us through that. And it is literally just a tip jar for this show. And a massive thanks for anyone who does any of those actions to support us. We do really appreciate it. Many thanks. I'm going to leave it there so I can get this show up as quick as I possibly can. And we'll come back and we'll be having loads to talk about next episode. So until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.